and then we're gonna.
You know what?
Okay?
I was already.
That'd be so much editing.
Why?
Edit out like half an hour of rambling.
No,
So
about 10 minutes.
yes,
And I'm sure it was even. I don't know. You could have went off.
It was intelligent.
Could have went off of any of that.
It was perfect.
Could have went off any of that. You chose
All
not
right.
to press the record button. That was your fault. That was not.
Well, it's rolling now.
That was not.
It's rolling now.
That was not a good decision on your behalf. So everybody who just missed the first 10 minutes of our ramble because Luke failed to press the record button. We provided ourselves with the perfect end to a podcast that we were having a hard time trying to figure out how the hell we were going to bring it all in.
There was nothing there. We weren't solving any world problems in that first 10 minutes.
Listen,
There was
I don't
nothing going
give
on.
I don't give a I'll be literal with you right now. I don't give a fuck how important the content of your podcast is. You're not solving any of the world's problems.
Ooh, you could
All we're doing here.
with that sweet Patreon page.
No,
You don't think that can solve problems?
all we're doing here is talking, and majorly we're talking to an audience of fairly affluent young males.
One of them.
Yeah, one of them.
One.
All one of them.
All one.
Whoever, and support us on Patreon, by the way. I don't know who you are, but Jim Jones,
Support-
if you're out there,
just sign a check, mail it to Patreon.
yeah, and it'll
and
get bounced. It'll get bounced. because-
it'll find its way to my apartment.
Yep, that's right. We live off of those Apple and Patreon checks. So
Yeah, Apple pays out.
I tell you what.
Actually, I don't think Apple pays out at all.
No, when you're sitting around and you're waiting, you've got no money coming in. I mean, it's nice to know that you're getting those 35-cent gratuity checks from Apple. It provides
Yeah, less than that, man.
It
I've gotten those checks. It's like a fraction of a cent.
it provides the peace of mind and security your family needs.
It's like some denomination of money that doesn't exist and had to be figured out by an algorithm, and that's how they pay you out.
It is. It's
I've gotten it from Apple Music and Spotify. It's just it's just a random number.
it is. It's algorithmic money.
Uh-huh.
They know that it's even though it says they're giving you physical money on a piece of paper, they're not giving you anything. Nothing comes for free in the Apple realm, that's for sure. And certainly nobody's. We're coming to a point where art and the quality of art is being undercut by corporations and industries that want to churn out manufactured art. It's not what it used to be. The craft isn't what it used to be. Music isn't even the same because of players like Apple, and it promotes a weeding out of the middle talent. And you've got those basement bands that can't get anywhere, and then you've got those talents that somehow show up out of nowhere to become these multi-mega stars. And then there's no real in between.
Yeah. There's always people like that,
Yeah.
but they fit like an image or whatever, and then they just kind of roll with it.
Yeah, that's true.
Prop them up. K-pop.
K-pop.
All those K-pop people.
K-pop them up. K-pop 'em
Yeah.
up.
I would love to see like a Korean band to see what's up.
In person.
Yeah, to see like how they do it.
Well,
Because as far as anybody knows, Korea is just all full of boy bands right now. That's the only thing that's going on. But
yeah.
I'm sure there's different things going on there.
Well, I'm not going to say I'm like big into K-pop. I'm not big into K-pop, but I do know of some girl bands. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, is it Blackpink? I don't know if
I
you've
don't
ever
even
heard of
know.
them. Six Bomb. You ever heard of Six Bomb?
Six Bomb.
Oh
No.
yeah. But it's an interesting thing about K-pop music. Like, it's not. I think a lot of people see the innocence of it. It's like, oh, it's innocent fun. Like, when they see the Korean pop that's out there right now, they're probably the people that were alive to remember it, like the glory days of the boy bands and girl bands, like the Spice Girls and the Backstreet Boys, and that organic, pure, wholesome sort of caricature that goes with the image of those type of bands doesn't necessarily actually exist with the Korean bands. A lot of them, including the ones that I just referenced, like Six Bomb in particular, is hypersexual. It's a
Really?
group of, I think it's like a group of 5 females. They're hypersexual. Like, some of their songs are actually banned in Korea. Some of their music videos are actually banned in Korea.
Yeah, because they're really conservative in Korea, right?
Yeah. But that's there's this weird dark side to K-pop that I don't think a lot of people realize. And it's intertwined with this Korean, deeply held cultural value of, putting way too much emphasis on outward appearance. So, what happened in the K-pop realm probably going on a decade ago, or maybe just a little bit sooner, is that a lot of these people that were getting in, these young boys and girls, young men and women that were getting into the K-pop industry, were getting plastic surgery as a requisite to them actually becoming a K-pop star.
Oh, wow.
And actually, the degree to which K-pop has been co-opted by the plastic surgery industry, and how deeply the desire to look as beautiful as possible on the outside permeates the psychology of Korean people. It's not healthy. I love I want to tell the majority of Korean people that obviously it's something that is a cultural thing. It's not a healthy thing. I don't know. I think that's it's part of the confusion that a society that exists between Asian cultural values, tradition, and American cultural infusion would be experiencing if they were left on their own to sort of mix it up. Right? You get this deep outward belief in all this Hollywoodization of Korea, with the movies and the K-pop and all this shit, and they start to outwardly project that Americanism, and it's the weird way in which it conflicts with the deeper cultural values of Korean people, essentially.
Right.
Which is it's kind of a weird thing. The culture of shame is a weirdly prevalent thing in places that Americanism has permeated. Japan is another classic example of that, this idea of this culture of shame, because so many of the things that they've come to accept as part of their incorporation of Americanism into their culture and their way of life conflicts with their traditional ideas and values on how to live and how to exist.
Right.
Yeah, so
Right.
you get that, right? The culture of shame thing. To a degree in Thailand too. Like I should qualify that for Joe Smith, the one viewer out there. I've actually the one listener.
Yeah.
I have been to Thailand, so I know Luke's heard that many times, but I know that we're probably going to be reiterating conversations ad nauseum that we've probably had in the past. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
I mean, they'll come up.
It has to, because there's, like I said, nobody's solving the world's problems through podcasts. Okay, through talking. That's not possible. I want to believe it is possible because I'm a hopeless.
You never know though, man. Like you could start a conversation and somebody would listen to it and be like, "Oh, I could actually do something about this," or I'll take that information that I got from a podcast and use it for something.
Well,
and that might be good. That might be complete evil. But
people
we don't know. I mean, obviously, there's thousands of podcasts out there, and clearly, it seems like
you're swimming upstream.
But a lot of them do a lot of good. A lot of them are positive. And then a lot of them are just those serialized, like, we're going to tell a story over 8 parts kind of thing, which is just stupid.
Can't do that.
But a lot of them are like, the Joe Rogan Experience, who has, like, actually really good people on.
Yep.
There's some good information in there.
Of course.
Good tidbits of things.
Well, the quality of...
it's clearly affected people positively.
The quality of a podcast like Joe Rogan isn't just in the value of the guests that you agree with. It's actually in the wide array of guests that he's willing to have on, and his willingness to have conversations with people that he doesn't necessarily agree with. And we live in a time now, socially and politically, where these things are not acceptable anymore. I mean, this is something that we've probably talked about a lot, is that you pick a side now, right? You're either on the liberal side, you're on the left side, or you're on the right side. I don't even care to throw up those dichotomies either. I don't necessarily believe in them. I believe we're all human beings. We create reasons to differentiate ourselves. But there's absolutely, there's no reason right now that I think that we should be in the social situation that we're in. We're in a lot of trouble now. We're in with the things that are going on, with the different partitions that are going on in society. I don't ever see us being able to reconciliate with each other. There's a there
Never.
Well, I mean, I find it very difficult to believe. Like, Canadians are a little bit different. Like, I don't know.
Mhm.
Joe Smith might not know we're broadcasting from Canada or whatever, so our opinions of what's happening in the United States, for example, are kind of outside opinions. That's whatever.
Before we get too far into this,
Yeah.
how will you explain a little bit about your background and how this is actually,
Yeah.
like, where this insight actually comes from?
Yeah. So I think, like, it probably sounds like a little bit of a tangent right now. We should qualify this before I start to introduce myself, that we in no way, shape, or form created a content structure for this particular episode. We decided right before the episode that we were literally going to, just kind of isolate, talk about some of the things that we talk about typically.
We'll probably get into the same stuff we usually talk about,
Of course.
which
So,
is it's all good stuff, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, are you introducing yourself on your shows first, or are we jumping right into the special guests? I don't consider myself special, by the way.
We'll just get right into you.
Okay. All right. So my name's Neal, and I am a master's degree student from McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario. I graduated with my MA in global politics with a minor's degree in global political economics. And before that, I got my BA in political sciences with the equivalent of a double minor. So I've been studying politics for a long time. I'm very fascinated by the way that we've created an entire society of armchair politicians. A lot of different media has been responsible for that, for empowering people, spreading a lot of misinformation, and it's become a little bit of a source of frustration for me to have individual conversations with people that may or may not understand fully the gravity of what it is that they're arguing for and stuff like that. So consider my appearance here today, or in the future, is just me venting and trying to get the air clear about I would say separating some truths from falsehoods. And also, I think there's a lot of people who want to take ideas to the extreme. I think the biggest problem with us right now is not only are we armchair politicians, but we are literally jumping to conclusions about things we don't have factual information for. And we're doing it in every sector of our lives. We're doing it with every single thing that affects us. Fact has really just been replaced with judgment and anecdotes. And it's time to kind of reel it back a little bit and have an honest to God conversation with people about the realities of things. So, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, great to be here, man.
Huge.
Just
thanks
great.
for coming on.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Pleasure's all mine.
First ever Luke Hamilton Night podcast.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Saturday night.
It's a great time to have it.
Saturday night, we're drinking beers. I mean,
in my super hot apartment.
Super hot.
Super hot. Surrounded by Buddha statues.
Okay, not to beat the dead horse, but please support our Patreon, and we're looking to.
It doesn't exist, by the way.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, we forgot to mention. Send your check to Patreon. It'll get bounced back. And we're hoping that eventually those checks will get sent to us so that we can afford the Dyson cooling fan for Luke's room.
That would be lovely.
That would be fantastic.
That would be lovely.
It's
not like an AC. It's not good enough.
Luke,
I'm gonna have to put ice packs in that fan.
My beer is sweating profusely. My beer is sweating profusely right now. It
good
is.
Times.
It's still a little bit cold, so I'm going to try to chug this.
Do it.
If
more in the ice box.
If you notice the quality of content go down gradually over the course of 1 hour, you probably know why.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. Yeah. Perfect. So just I love to talk about current issues.
I mean, there's plenty of current issues going on right now. I mean, we're sitting here. It's the 4th of July. We all know what's going on in the States right now.
Happy Independence Day, everybody, by the way.
Happy Independence Day.
Oh,
Good time.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a great day.
It is a great day.
But as Canadians, it's always funny seeing what's going on in the States. And it's like, It's like that George Carlin bit where he said, life is like a circus, and if you have it, and if you live in the States, you have a front row ticket. But I feel like it makes more sense if you live in Canada, you have a front row ticket, because we're really just watching it happen.
Yeah, I
But
suppose
we don't have to live in it.
I suppose if you were the joke, you wouldn't be aware of the fact that you were the joke.
Yeah.
But you know, it's amazing how every little bit of current contemporary political irony can be reduced or distilled to a George Carlin joke.
All of them. That's a good source of all information.
You know,
It's
like
so good.
one of my favorites is the rich. I'm paraphrasing here. The rich people, it's a club, and you ain't in it.
Yeah.
Right.
The guy was so good, very insightful.
Actually,
we need more guys like that.
He found a way to
Get around.
take he found a way to take the frustrations that I articulate in a very intellectual way and feed them to an audience of people that may not have ever even been exposed to the idea of politics or how nasty or disgusting it actually is. Right? And he was able to take that and make it relatable to a different group of people who otherwise wouldn't give two damns about politics or anything like that.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Like the people that are in his audience, they're there because he's funny. They're not there because of the politics. The politics is an accoutrement. He uses it as an instrument. But, I mean, there's a lot of meat on that bone, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God. But anyways,
I wonder if he was like the first guy that actually started doing that. So I don't know too many comedians that were doing that beforehand.
political satire.
Kind of, yeah, the satire,
I
the
mean,
commentary. A little
I mean,
bit.
you had, if I can remember this correctly, because I was super young when this was all going down, but I remember Dennis Leary, I think, had like a rant. It was always a political rant. It was a socio-political rant. Dennis Miller, same thing, I believe,
Yep.
right? They would start their shows with like a 1 minute, just spew out all this crap, you know, just get it all off my chest, sort of.
Sure.
You know, yeah, monologue,
Sure.
right? And it's just frustration about the current state of things. But things were not nearly as bad back then as they are now.
Didn't seem as dire.
Yeah. Part of it was because people weren't as politically aware, so there is a benefit to people becoming self-educated in terms of
You didn't get the constant feed
Yeah.
back then as you do now. Like
And-
as we were talking about this a little bit earlier on in the night, like how it's just constant news. The 24-hour news cycle is like they're picking apart things, looking for new things to broadcast and comment on, and it's all in the sake of ratings and
clickbait.
the clickbait as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Ratings have turned into clickbait now.
And
This is the modern equivalent of ratings is clickbait.
the mainstream media has turned into a proverbial circus, for-profit circus. Yeah, no. So you know, for me, just to explain kind of where I'm at with, you know, where I get my news and stuff like that, I think it's very, very important for anybody who's listening right now to not put a ton of stock and investment into their social media feeds for their news. I highly, strongly encourage you not to use tools like Google. If you have a question or an inquiry about something, there's a lot of other tools out there that you can use. I use DuckDuckGo personally. And the reason why I say that is because these stories and the information that's being given to you is being selected for you. And that's not, you know, when you live in a supposed free society with free speech and freedom of the press being fundamental pillars of that society, you know, be it Canada, the United States, Western Europe, or whatever, you know, you're not supposed to have that level of control over the narrative. And that's the problem right now. It's not just that one entity has control over the narrative. I mean, I can tell you a number of times, a number of stories where I've blatantly known that those stories were false. And just for fun, I've turned on Reuters half an hour after I heard it on CNN, and then I turned on a local media station in, you know, in Boston, and they're all using the same story. They're all using the same story. Sometimes not only the same story, sometimes even the same words.
Right,
there's
exactly.
there's
We've all seen those compilations
there's
of like newscasters that just use the
there is a narrative.
exact same way of talking.
There's a narrative. The reason why they force the media to adopt this, read it line for line, is because there's no way of going off the narrative that's being sold to you. They want you to go word for word. Those words have been procured by psychologists. They're procured, like, even down to the use of one word over another. I mean, those choices of what they say, how they say it, when they say it, why they say it, those are all very, very procured choices, right? And the entire Western media complex.
It all fits like a planned narrative, right?
That's right. And the entire Western media complex has become this self-fulfilling cycle of news that's just fed to everybody who lives on this side of the world, and it's a propaganda sandwich, right? It's I mean, I hate to put it this way because we talk about lies a lot in the media and stuff like that. Every media in the world is biased to a certain degree. Every media in the world is biased to a certain degree. Media, by its definition, whether it be newspaper or whether it be radio media or television, it's all propaganda by definition. It's all propaganda.
Is that what the actual definition of media is?
No, not
What
the.
is, what,
no,
what is the actual definition of media?
I'm not going to get into it.
Because I thought it was something very similar to that.
Well, yeah.
Like a loose translation to propaganda.
I don't believe it's a literal translation.
I think this is just making it.
Yeah, definitely. The Buddha statue must
The
go.
Buddha is doing no good.
Well,
right now.
if we were somewhere where
Sorry, buddy.
If we were somewhere where Buddhism was big and you just put that Buddha on the floor, you'd have your ass kicked.
This would be a big problem.
Oh yeah, that'd be a huge
I
problem.
feel bad about it.
Disrespecting the Buddha.
As a Buddhist, I feel bad about it, but I don't have.
I
don't have anywhere else to put it right now.
When did this happen?
Why do you think I have so many Buddha statues lying
I
around?
don't fucking know. I do know that orange is a big color in Thailand, so you've definitely stepped up your game without even knowing it.
Picking some good colors.
Yeah.
Hey, I like orange.
Yeah. Luke decided to decorate his walls with towels. Yes.
Yeah, well, they were here when I moved in.
Sound reverberating towels.
They're doing all right. One day I'll upgrade to egg cartons.
That's right.
And it'll be fine.
That's right. And we'll stuff them with cotton balls. Yeah, that's right.
That's how you do it.
And we'll fucking gorilla tape them to the walls. That's right. Yeah, we'll turn this place into an insane asylum.
A fortress. A fortress of insanity.
That's friggin' great. That's friggin' great. Yeah, no, so I mean, just getting back to the point of what we were talking about. It's please do your own homework when you're deciding or selecting what medium you get your information from. That's all. If you're ever worried about is what I'm reading just basically reinforcing a narrative or whatever, not your own narrative, check multiple sources. Go, do a 100 over on a story. Don't just let it fly. Don't be one of those people who reads something on your Facebook news feed or your social media news feed and then goes around talking to people like it's a fact on the street. You're social distancing at the liquor store or the beer store, and you just start harking off to people about what you read on your Facebook feed in 40 characters or less. That doesn't make you an informed person. That's not.
And the biggest problem about social media right now, the way the algorithm works is that everything you like is thrown back at you tenfold.
That's right.
So you'll never get a counter argument to whatever you're doing.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people right now, they get stuck in their bubble and they think that is all of reality.
They go
because
out there
they
in
don't
the
they
world.
They don't see the other sides of things.
They go out there in the world and they realize there's a counter narrative.
Then when they meet somebody with has a different point, they're like, "You're the outsider. You don't make any sense to me."
Well, it kind of goes back to the point I was trying to make earlier about how the powers that be have created a very, very strong tool for physical apartheid between people. They've used every tool in the toolkit, every social narrative that you can possibly use to create factionalism amongst people to prevent people from getting together for a common purpose, to distract people from the real enemies, that work against their interests on a daily basis. And the diversion is working fantastically right now with all the Black Lives Matter protests right now. The media is trying so hard right now as they would have you believe that this is all about race, nothing more than race. and that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
This is a multifactorial issue, folks. It affects people of all classes, genders, races equally. If you don't believe that the current economic and social climate, not just Black Lives Matter, but other things have a large part to play in what's going on in the United States, then you probably haven't been paying attention since 1980.
Yeah.
Yeah. The signs have been there.
Yeah, we've been talking about this as largely a class
Yes.
issue.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't even call it a class issue. You know, what you have here is, you know, the economy is such now that, you know, we've basically created a casino for the richest of the rich, right? You know, those people that have money are able to borrow money at 0% interest. They're able to expand their own interests, be it their business. They're able to merge and acquire other businesses that would be considered their direct competitors. I mean, this is a fantastic time to be ridiculously rich. It's a fantastic, you know,
Sky's the limit.
There's
if
two
you have
different
millions
there's
of
two
dollars.
there's two different logics right here. Okay, for the majority of people, I mean, any household making 150,000 or under, you're probably running on the logic of survivalism. If you're making if your household generates 50 million to a billion or a billion plus a year, you're thinking crisis opportunity. How do I use my liquidity and my assets to get bigger and to consolidate my control? Right? So that's why you always see, whether it be like, you know, during the financial crisis, 07, 08, during this crisis, what you actually see is a pilfering of the economy. You're seeing a pilfering, right? Not only are the largest corporations receiving the biggest government subsidies, but they're actually turning around using those subsidies to buy back their own stocks so that they don't owe a percentage of their shares to anybody but themselves, and they can bank basically 100% of their business becomes liquid, right?
Very lucrative.
Yeah, and then you know, and
that's how the rich stay rich. They keep doubling down on this kind of idea of.
Well, here, you know, like part of the guiding philosophy of our economy for the last 40 years has been, you know, one of the linchpins of neoliberal economics, so to speak, new liberal economics, is this idea of it's called the trickle down theory, and you know, Margaret Thatcher was very, very adamant on proposing the idea that if you were to give money to the rich, it wouldn't matter that they were rich, because that money would end up trickling down to the lowest levels of the economy, and inevitably, even though it started off in rich hands, would end up benefiting the people at the very bottom. And when you look at charts of consumerism, you clearly realize that's never historically been the case. Rich people are insanely fucking cheap. They hoard their money. They don't pay taxes. They do everything that they can to unleverage themselves from the levers that bind you in your life. And because they have the money, they have the lawyers, they're able to find the loopholes. You know, there's no reason why a company like, you know, I mean, how rich was Apple before they started? You know what? The truth is, Apple probably even just started producing their products in China right from the beginning. I assume they probably would have emerged at that time, but like, you know, so you're able to.
Maybe the Apple One was all American made, but
yeah.
After that, I mean, they were mass producing it.
But here's the economy as such. So you have a company like Apple, right? A company like Apple, it maybe employs like. So here's the thing: a company like Apple only employs technically probably like 500 to 1,000 people. That's because the only people on their payroll are the actual designers that work in California, right? So you produce your product in China. That product's built by a third-party manufacturer, Foxconn.
They're like on contract.
That's right.
They're not actual employees.
So our economy is such now that, and this is how perverse it is. It's like we allow a company like Apple to produce a product for pennies on the dollar in another country because it's economically viable for them, to sell it back to their own consumer market for thousands % markup, and then to take the profits and offshore them in the Cayman Islands so they don't have to pay taxes. That's how do you think, like, and this is all written by these rules, these legislations, which are binding this global economy that we have, are all written by these people who are benefiting.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. Like you're
It's definitely very clear, and there's been tons and tons of documentaries, tons of papers coming out of about this kind of stuff. But do you think the people who are in the streets protesting right now know these things? Do you think they know the deeper root of the problems? Or is it like a surface level argument? And I'm not saying that like the protest is illegitimate or anything, and obviously Black Lives Matter and like it's very important. But do you think they're just kind of running around repeating some kind of rhetoric instead of actually getting to the deeper root of the problem here?
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, like, it's preferable for the narrative right now to be construed. So, when you're talking about, like, you can't put a percentage to the people that are woke, and I use that in the literal sense. I don't mean that in the social justice sense. I mean the people that are kind of understand that there's deeper issues, there's institutional issues which are trying to be addressed through this. They're probably outnumbered by a great percentage to a small percentage. It's still not bad that those people that are out there on the surface fighting are out there. They're out there doing what they think they should be doing, but they're not doing the job that they think they're doing. They are so
Okay.
So to unwrap that point further, so it is very, very, very beneficial for the narrative to stay exclusively focused on Black lives, and for the narrative to stay exclusively focused on racial issues, right? And the media is going to do everything in their power to frame the issue as if it was solely about race, because that is deflecting people from paying attention to the things that are really happening, right?
Right.
We've talked.
That makes sense.
We've talked about Plato before.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the Republic, and to anybody who doesn't know what Plato's Republic is, it's an account of dialogue between Socrates and a bunch of young rich aristocrats in ancient Greece, and in my opinion, it forms the entire basis for our democracy as we know it today. If anybody has the stomach to read Socratic dialogue, I highly suggest that you take a look at it. The allegories contained within that story will tell you everything you need to know about the way democracy looks on the surface and the way it operates underneath. And what we're referring to here is one allegory called the cave. And the cave says that people will believe whatever it is that you present them with, right? He sets up this dialogue by saying, imagine you had a group of people, and behind those group of people, there was a stage with a curtain. And in front of that stage with a curtain, behind that curtain, there was a fire. And there were a bunch of people that weren't looking at that stage, 4 or 5 people, just envision it, that were looking at the shadows that were cast on the wall on the opposite side. They were looking at the shadows cast by the fire. If they never knew any better, they would believe that the play was happening on the wall right in front of them. But if they were allowed to turn around and see what was actually happening, they would realize that the reality is completely different. What they thought they were seeing, they weren't seeing. What they thought was reality wasn't reality, right? The problem is convincing people after a long period of time that what they've seen isn't real.
Right.
That is the greatest challenge to the human intellect, is trying to get people to understand that the way that they see things is not right. Okay? And he's trying to explain the complications. And he says, imagine one day, one person took one of those people that was looking at shadows their whole life and pulled them out of the cave altogether and showed them the sun and showed them the light and showed them the animals and said, this is actually reality. There's 2 types of reactions that would happen. There's the suspended disbelief, those people who will not change their mind and will not accept that what you're telling them now is reality. They will not believe you. And those other people who not only will think about what they've just been presented, will rationalize it, will come to terms with the idea that what they've seen is wrong, and will be able to readjust their reality accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this pertains to, I think, what it explains, the dichotomy between the people in the protests. Getting back to the protests, the large percentage of people that are there just because it's one issue, and the small percentage of people that are there because it's a larger issue, right? And they know that, right? I don't know what percentage of those people live inside or outside the cave. I know that they're all there because they think they're there for the right reasons. And I would say that even though those people that only have a superficial knowledge of the situation, or at least believe that it's a singular focused protest, those people are still out there in numbers. Right? They're still showing numbers. So,
But how many people do you think are going to go back in the cave?
After this?
Yeah.
Oh, I think a lot less. I think a lot less. I think the Western, for the last 300 years, Western Europe and North America have had a monopoly on the narrative, have had a monopoly on the stage play. They've been creating the puppets on the shadows on the walls. And, the North American and Western European consumer, as a consumer of media, has been the one staring at the shadows being cast on the walls, accepting it as reality, right? But gradually, I believe there's less and less people that are willing to crawl back into the cave once they've been exposed.
Definitely. Especially with the internet right now. Like the ability to
he's just going to go there. The internet,
go
especially
straight
with
to the internet.
Especially with the internet right now.
Delicious internet.
I love it.
Yeah, but there's so much information out there.
Yes.
It's up to the individual to actually research things like this.
Yes.
Obviously, not everyone does that, and they prefer cat memes. The options are endless on the internet. It's just up to you to actually figure it out and find these things.
Yeah.
And obviously, not everyone uses it. Some people use it. I'd say maybe 80% of people on the internet use it as some type of entertainment.
Yes.
And the remainder are actually using it for whatever personal research they need.
Yeah. And only for small points in time. I mean, even the researchers are using it for personal interest at a certain period of time. You're going to turn it off. You're going to turn off the journal articles at like 5 o'clock, and you're going to watch YouTube. There's no doubt about it.
People still need entertainment.
You're not going to.
And considering that people don't pay for cable or anything anymore, that is the entire entertainment.
We've cut the cord to pay 7 different independent distributors $9.99 a month. Which eventually equates.
I don't get that. I don't know.
Equates.
I would love to know the numbers of how many people are actually paying for every subscription service, because it doesn't seem like.
How many people are hanging on to their monthly free subscription?
Why would people do that?
Some people just.
Obviously, so many people have Netflix, and if you have Netflix, that makes sense because that's like the main one that started it all. But if you're paying for all of them, if you're paying for like Crave as well, and then Disney Plus, which seems
look what they've done. Look what they've done to you. They get you hooked on. They get you hooked on this show and that show. If you still have cable, for example, you're seeing a Crave or a Netflix commercial every 3 or 4 commercials, and it's always like Netflix original, Crave original, and you know what? They do a good job of getting the consumer hooked on the idea of wanting to watch a show. And then once they've done that, they realize that, holy shit, like I have to actually own Crave and Netflix to watch these 2 shows. Like, yeah, and there's people that love TV so much, they've cut the cord without addressing their love of television. So they cut their $79.99 cable bill every month to go with like a $79.99 independent subscription bill every month. And I don't think a lot of people have consciously realized that, right? Like, the market isn't stupid. They see the trends, where they're going, and they're just going to create and facilitate technology which is going to make you feel comfortable with parting ways with your money. And that's all they've done. They realized at a certain point that having cable wasn't sexy anymore to the young generation, so they created a new cable for the young generation. That's all it is.
And then they'll bring ads into it.
Well, that's
Just like the
it
original
was.
concept
It was
of cable.
always. It was always a monetary. It was always a platform that was built. Like the idea of streaming services were always platforms that were built with the idea of being monetized.
Mhm.
Google is not like a revolutionary. Google is just something that was going to serve as a blueprint of everything that was going to come after it. You know, unless you want to pay for the premium subscription to YouTube, which I'm not willing to do that. I'm,
No, I don't know why anybody would do that.
you know, there's myriad content on Google, and you don't need the premium subscription to access the majority of it.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I haven't looked into it too much, but from what I can tell, paying for the premium service just gets rid of the ads.
Yeah.
So really, who cares? You
Yeah.
can skip the ads.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, exactly. You only got to watch
Not a big
8
issue.
seconds or 9 seconds of the ad.
yeah,
so,
yeah.
So be it, right?
Unless you're one of those psychopaths that uploads videos and opts in for as many ads as possible, so you have like 3 to start off your 3-minute video.
That's a beautiful thing.
People love doing that.
Yeah. Or the
And maybe they make some money off of it. I
or
don't
the
know.
I've monetized my video, therefore I'm using every 15-second interval to introduce you to an ad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love those ones too.
Oh god, I can't even.
Those
do that,
those
man.
people who literally were waiting for their first video to hit 10,000 views so that they could literally or you know the 10-minute video. I think it's like a 10-minute video on YouTube. It's 10 minutes before you can monetize
Yeah.
it or some shit like that, right?
Mhm.
So you get all these Twitch gamers and stuff like that. Like I watch Twitch game, you know, when I'm not political, when I'm not being political, I like to game and shit like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like to drink and I like to game. Yeah. Anyways, yeah. So when I'm not being, you know, hyper political, I like to watch some of these streams, and not even just streams, but some of the videos that some of these Twitch gamers put out and stuff like that. They're always 10 minutes and 22 seconds, and the amount of content. If you were to really boil the water down, you know, is probably like 2 minutes.
Right.
Right? It's got this clickbait title.
Yep.
And they don't talk about whatever it is that was in the clickbait title for the entirety of 7 minutes. They squeeze in a 45-second bit about it. It doesn't have anything to do with what the title said, and then they 3 minutes worth of jargon, and that's it. I hit the mic stand, friends. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was a fucking amateur move. It was an amateur
Yeah.
move. I'm starting to flail around in here.
Eventually, I'll be able to get some pro equipment.
No, it's fine.
I'll make sure that actually doesn't happen.
No, it's
Because
absolutely
there is ways of fixing
yeah.
those minor problems.
Yeah, so
But
I mean,
well, I'm not too well versed in Twitch. I didn't know that was actually how it was happening.
it's an interesting universe. You should get on Discord.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. Don't.
Okay, I will.
Don't.
It's already done.
Don't fucking do it.
I'm in it now.
Don't do it.
I'm too deep now.
It's one of those new things now where I'm online and I'm gaming and I'll just be talking to some random dude in Kentucky and he'll be like, dude, are you on Discord? I'm like, no, I'm not. Dude, I haven't been on Facebook for 15 years. Like, what the fuck? You think I'm on Discord? I'm not on Discord. Forget it.
See, that's another very crazy thing about you. No social media.
I
whatsoever.
wouldn't be
Like,
able.
it's very odd.
I would lack a sense of legitimacy for all of the things that I fundamentally believe if I was. And I'm sure that as we go forward, you guys will be presented with some of these things, but you'll see how it contradicts with the usage of my ideas contradict with the usage of social media and how literally I feel like I would just be doing you a disservice to tell you how I feel about certain things, but then turn around and use social media because a lot of my beef with misinformation right now is centered around social media, where people are getting their information, how it's being disseminated amongst people, and how it's being weaponized to keep people apart. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big problem.
Weaponized to keep people apart.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's like not what it's branded as, for sure. Connectivity
Oh,
is what all social media is supposed to be about, right?
absolutely.
And that's the insane thing. But it's clear that it is pulling people apart a lot more.
Yes.
I mean, you see a lot less people going outside, even before COVID.
Yep.
A lot less people actually going out and interacting in a human way.
Yeah.
Facebook
we-
kind
we-
of destroyed all of that.
We say human way because, you know, we have seen an influx in homeless people. We're not going to say that they're acting in humane ways or human ways. They're, kind of doing their own thing. Like where we are right now, we're in one of the bigger cities in Canada, and I think both of us have noticed that since COVID struck, there's been a pretty big influx of homeless people. Maybe not even just in the numbers, but in the volumes of which they're allowed to kind of just loiter and hang around on the streets. Not only
The
just
tent city is
just
growing.
loiter and hang around, but the degree to which they're being accommodated by the city for
Yeah.
interloping and loitering. Like you were just pointing out to me, out in front of our hockey arena, they've got Porto Johns there for the homeless people.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not. It's an actual. It's a. I'm not going to call
And
it
a security guard, a personal security.
You see that?
Security detail.
I mean, it's still short of rolling out a red carpet, but at the same time, that's like you know what that is? That's solutions. That's a short-term solution to a long-term problem, right? Like these.
Where are those people going to go in the winter?
That's right.
What's going to happen then?
Yeah. So,
Might seem fine right now, but eventually there needs to be shelters or affordable housing, some kind of plan put into place.
I'd really like to, I like to address issues of the economy too. I'm not somebody to run away from them. Like so many times when I'm listening to a newscast, I hear a newscaster will phrase a story like, 30 million people lost their job. It's it's okay to say that. I get what you're saying. Like if you've got 30 seconds or less to make your point, but you're missing the human experience when you're not thinking about each individual and what that actually means. And the fact that we are now in the greatest recession. First of all, we never came out of the 2007-2008 recession. Every bit of recovery was nothing but artificial. It was not dealing with the real economy. The real economy never improved. It was always ground level implosion. The stock market improved. We'll get into the reasons why for that, I'm sure, as shows go along and as we get a little bit more structured. But and there was never a real recovery for the real economy after 2007, 2008. All we've done is leverage our economy even further in the last 10 years. 13 years, and we're about to, because of a natural disaster, the drapes are about to come off. The king's clothes are about to come off. Right? The glass house that the economy is built on is about to crumble. The drapes, so to speak, going back to the cave, the allegory of the cave. The curtains are about to be pulled back on the play. The people who are looking at the cave figures before are going to see the real actors and, expose the real truth for what it is.
But I think that's what people say all the time, anytime something like this happens, like a major crisis, like the last time with the Occupy Wall Street movement. I mean, it was all the same things 10 years ago.
Oh, wow.
And how many more times does that have to happen before people actually do something about it? Because people clearly a lot of people realize the issues with our system or where our society is structured, but nothing is really being done.
No.
So you could protest until the cows come home, but like at what point does anything actually get fixed? Well, we could just keep doing this every 10 years when the market crashes, when it's systematically supposed to crash. And then what?
Okay. So you touched on something that's really interesting there. I hate that when I have a point forged, but then your very last point is going to say something that's actually going to tweak me in an entirely different direction.
That's good.
The last point that you made,
I'm throwing you for a loop. That's the whole reason why I'm here.
The last point that you made was, and you said this was quote unquote, the market is going to crash every 10 years like it's supposed to.
Yes, because it does.
No, that's not true. That's absolutely not true. Okay. Like, if you look at the cycle of boom and bust in capitalist history, what you notice is that the intervals between crises get shorter and shorter, and the amount of dip that you get in the recession gets greater and greater. So the amount of effect is more immediate and it's sharper.
Okay.
and it takes longer to recover.
Mm.
So part of the difference between, say,
So digging a hole, basically.
well, okay, so part of the difference between the 20s and the 30s, the Great Depression of the 20s, right, and the modern depression, which is going to be worse than that, believe it or not, was a staunch belief in democracy and capitalism. People actually believed, even in the Great Depression, that things were going to get better. It's very, very difficult to find somebody nowadays that A, hasn't been affected by the ebbs and flows, and B, would give you a honestly rosy opinion of how they see themselves coming out of this. Like asking a 20-year-old right now, do you see yourself being a very successful person by the time you're 40? I think, if you were to ask somebody,
a slim percentage of
if
them
you were to
that
ask somebody in 1980 that, you'd probably get a lot of optimism.
for sure.
Nowadays,
But do you think that optimism actually made it better? Like all the people that got out of the Great Depression that thought it will get better, is that part of the reason why it did get better?
no.
Really?
No. It was people's belief and trust in institutions was different back then.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason why people distrust their government is because they distrust each individual institution inside the government. They don't trust that, the Treasury is going to look after them if something happens to their bank account. They don't trust that the system is going to be there for. Why should they? Look what's happened in coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
You had $1,200 one-time hand-me-out checks to families of 4 people. I think it was $1,200 plus like $400 for each child or something. Mm-hmm. Correct me if I'm wrong. If there's anybody out there
In the States, by
in
the
the
way.
States,
Yeah.
In Canada, it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
We're socialists, so
Some semi-decent handouts going out here.
maybe a little bit too good.
Mm-hmm.
Stories.
Government's starting to get into the red here.
Definitely some stories of people getting paid more than they were getting paid by the government more than they were getting paid in their paychecks.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The system's not great.
It was disincentivizing going back to work, people. That's the downside of the safety net right there. But don't worry, Canada.
Big time.
It's like we were talking about before. The government's going to hand out a bunch of checks because it's an emergency, and then they're going to do an audit on those checks, and they're going to come back on those people who were abusing it. So, at first, in Canada, I think all it was is fill out a simple form, and you were eligible for like a one-time. It was a couple $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000.
Mm-hmm.
Just fill out a form. But
Yep.
a lot of people, they probably took that and they're like, yeah, this is great, free $3,000. The government's not stupid. They're going to come back to you in your income tax next year, and they're going to be like, what's this?
They'll figure it out.
Oh, they'll figure it out. You'll get fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's free. There's no free ride, So,
Not at all.
right?
I mean, obviously, the people that really needed it
yeah.
aren't going to get fucked.
Like
but
those people out on the street right there that are out in increasing numbers,
they get nothing.
They got nothing. They got nothing.
They don't have addresses, and the government needs addresses.
The government was perfectly happy to set them up
problem.
with a porta potty and a security agent, but didn't want to give them physical addresses, so they couldn't get a job.
No. Yeah, that's why they had to get kicked out of the shelters.
Sounds about right.
Very convenient.
Yeah, well, local politics. I'm not involved in that.
Well, there's probably a whole thing behind that. It's like if they
I'm
had
not
addresses.
involved in politics on the local level. You know what?
Yeah,
the ass clowns which govern our city, and they are ass clowns. They are seriously just a bunch of ass clowns. I'm pretty sure it's the same way in all local politics in Canada. So little faith, and the types of personalities that they allow to become people like mayor and council members and shit. It's hilarious. It's hilarious. It's a little bit sad. These people aren't. These people are.
Nobody even really knows them.
No.
Nobody knows exactly who's running the show here.
No, that's right.
It just kind of happens. But that's Canadian politics for you.
Yeah.
things just kind of happen, and everybody in Canada is too passive to do anything about it. So
Yep. And we've said we've said in the past that a city like this one, which is going through a high degree of gentrification right now as we speak, it succeeds in spite of itself, not because of the competence of its leaders. Right. So, but yeah, no, I mean, that's part of the larger reason why I actually never engage in local politics. You want to talk about a level of politics where you never get anything done? The local level of politics is where politics goes to die. It's where action goes to die. It really is. I'm sorry. It just is, right? You're working with these really low budgets and you're trying to make all these, great improvements to your city. How are you going to do it? And you've got all these how-to books, and I'm not kidding. Like literally how-to books, like, inspired by urban philosophy, like, The Creative City. I can't remember the artist's name right now, but like Hamilton is a classic example. The city that we're in is called Hamilton. Hamilton is a classic example of what I would call, what I would say would be a city that adopted the creative city philosophy probably more religiously than most Canadian cities, for sure. To a degree, it's reaping the benefits of that. But on the other end of it, like, the creative city is proposing, a complete overhaul of, it's a rebeautification that isn't outright hostile to things like social housing, but discourages it through its practices of urban use and stuff like that. To the using art to cover up blight, and trying to encourage city councilors and things to find creative ways to beautify their city and make it more attractive to people in the arts. And apparently, the people in the arts are supposed to be the saviors of your city. Like, could you imagine that?
That's the goal.
That's
a huge marketing scheme on Hamilton's part, especially it being cheaper than Toronto. So I've met tons of artists that have come down from Toronto to live here because it's way too expensive to be an artist in Toronto.
I have no doubt in my mind that it's succeeded in attracting artists. There's no doubt about that.
It's a weird. I'd love to see the percentage of people who live in Hamilton who are musicians and artists, because it seems like everybody I meet now has their side hustle is like visual art, or they're in a band or something like that.
Are you sure that's not just a byproduct of today's society where everybody just necessarily has to have a side hustle?
Maybe.
Like,
it could be that.
Like, you know what, you're gonna.
I think people are getting more creative too because it's a lot easier to do that kind of shit. Like, I meet a lot of photographers, and it's like, photography's fucking easy these days.
Yes,
it's all point and shoot.
Yes, it is.
And Photoshop takes like half an hour to learn, so.
Yeah, that's true.
I've taken classes in it. It's super easy.
Yeah. No, I mean.
But that's just one thing. But I mean, everybody does their own fucking thing. Like, I have art on the walls here in this room.
Yeah, you got your scat paintings over there.
Yeah, it's something I do.
Calling them scat paintings.
Just for whatever,
He just fucking Van Gogh'd all over the canvas.
I'm not gonna gloat, but I've had a painting in a gallery.
Whoa.
So.
Ooh, buddy.
Ooh, oh my god.
Nice job, eh?
I'm almost famous.
So, I mean,
Not really.
How did it get there? Did you take it there and present them with it, or?
It was some kind of event that that one gallery, Hamilton Artists Inc., was having. So they were looking for local artists to bring some art to them, and I had something to offer.
Good for you.
Good for you. It was like a weekend thing, and they were trying to sell some of the art, but mine didn't sell, so whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
no big deal, but it was in a gallery. That kind of looks good on a resume, as a legitimate artist has once told me.
So for me, like, I would probably say that there's a, based on where you live, I would say that you're absolutely right. You probably meet more people with a artistic side hustle than you do, because downtown Hamilton is considered an edgy, hip place.
Yeah.
It actually attracts people for its edginess. Right?
Yeah,
you're
super
not seeing me friggin' use air quotes. It's not that edgy, people. Believe me, I'm not trying to throw you away from this place, but I don't know how.
I actually looked into the crime rates.
I don't know how a high fucking crime level is considered an attractive element of a city. That's just stupid. Don't.
No, the thing is, I was actually curious about this, so I looked in the crime rates of major cities in Canada the other day, Just because I don't know, I'm fucking bored all the time. And
Oh,
this is what I do with my spare time. But
because misinformation, because people
Yeah.
are always. What is the first thing you say? People say to you when you say I live in Hamilton. Oh, isn't the crime bad there?
have you ever been shot?
Yeah,
It's
yeah. Like,
no, I have
You
not.
idiot.
I was looking into it. It's like it's a lower crime rate than Toronto.
It's way lower.
Yeah,
It's substantially lower.
but people don't think as Toronto is being violent.
No.
It's fucking
Don't you
weird.
dare. Don't you dare.
A lot of people think it's fine.
Don't talk about the problems of Toronto.
It's a utopia.
It is. It's a self-isolated bubble of reinforcement and
Oh,
happiness.
I just learned their recent idea to battle COVID so they can continue the NHL
Oh, good.
is literally building a dome over downtown Toronto.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh.
To I don't know, keep people out of Sector 5
I'll tell you what.
of the Citadel.
I'll tell you what. In a time of crisis, with so many people unemployed and governments supposedly on their knees with fiscal restriction, it just seems appropriate that we would build a fucking bubble over downtown Toronto.
They need it.
Yep.
They deserve it.
And you know what?
Very important.
We should actually close it off from the outside. Not trying to be rude because
I was talking to my buddy about it, and I'm like, you'd have to put AC in this thing because you'd have the greenhouse effect would be like devastating in this bubble in downtown Toronto. Oh, probably nice in the winter, I guess.
Oh yeah. It's like the only
Start growing tropical.
it's the only semi-tropical zone in Canada.
Yeah.
We're growing oranges inside the dome, people. Come on in.
Yeah, then I was like, well, you're gonna need like a chip embedded in your hand to get in and stuff to make sure you're COVID free.
I would be interested to know how many other cities across the world
Feel that entitled.
would be so fucking stupid as to believe
Yeah.
that seems incredibly.
I'm kind of hoping it's a joke, but but if it's not, that's
Please
so
do
good.
tell me
That's
if this
so
was
good.
on passe or if this was passed off as something that was like legitimately in the newspaper or something.
I don't even know. I'd have to look into it a lot more. My buddy
Christ.
just brought it up the other day.
No.
Like not as a joke, like he actually
No.
read that somewhere.
I
But
don't.
I haven't done enough research on it, unfortunately, so it might be completely
they-
fucking false.
So are they gonna make it out of diamondium or diamondillium? That's a Futurama reference.
Totally. And then they'll have fucking tubes all over the place that take you around.
Firing us from one destination to another.
Get rid of the subway. Have tubes.
I don't want to get into a traffic accident in one of those tubes. That might be watermelon for both parties.
Yeah, well, it's probably gonna be more efficient than their subway system.
Yeah, that's true.
There are 2 lines. Ooh, 2 lines.
Well, they want to use the taxpayers' money to build a third one, as far as I'm aware, don't they?
Billions.
Billions.
We can't get a light rail here, but they can drill holes in the ground there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I see a lot of things as a slight. I see slights where slights don't even exist. I actually saw the change of the Ontario license plate from blue on white to white on blue
Yeah.
as like a pro Toronto move, and I was in like.
Is it a pro Toronto?
I don't know, but it
Why
just
would
reminds
be?
me of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and it left me.
Oh, fuck, that's right.
An ugly point of disdain. I was
That's
just
true.
like, you bastards. But whatever.
It's too abrasive.
It is.
I don't like it.
I don't know how so many people got new license plates so fast. The DMV doesn't move that fast.
I have no
That's
idea.
that's the thing that I don't get.
I don't even know why you'd want one. It's like it's a little bit too in your face. It's kind of like looking at a New York license plate.
Yes,
It's like that
with
yellowish.
the yellow on black.
Yeah, that weird shit. It's just a little bit too much.
I'll be honest.
You don't
with
need to be artistic about your license plate. It's just a code.
I
on a plate.
kind of like the New York license plate. I'm not even gonna lie.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Like gross yellow.
I don't mind it. I don't mind it.
Dude, they should put Trump's face on it.
Yes,
Really, big time.
that's true. Mega.
It should be Mitch.
Every license plate has to start with MAGA. Mega 6726.
Fuck. That would start getting confusing.
64 Mega 72.
You'd be calling the cops for like a drive-by, and it's like, I don't know, the license plate started with MAGA. Yeah, so does everyone
Yeah,
else.
everybody else's, sir. Can you can you define that, please? Yeah.
That'd be great.
No.
That'd be great.
No, it's good. It's good.
I mean, it would be pretty amazing if he used his executive abilities to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think so.
If I was Trump, I'd be trying to get away with a lot of shit.
Apparently,
A lot of really funny, dumb shit like that.
well, you want to talk about dumb shit? I don't know if you heard, but when they first sent out the checks, when the Treasury first cut the $1,200 checks, the fiscal emergency checks, he actually called back the first batch of them so that his signature could be applied to them. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's awesome. Holy shit.
How do you like that?
Yeah,
You want to talk about like narcissistic?
First of all, it takes a month for the checks to get to you.
Yes.
They were physical checks.
Yes.
Do they live in the dark ages or something?
Yes.
Everything here is direct deposit.
You know, in the United States, they didn't have debit until about 10 years ago or 12 years ago.
No way.
Yeah. Oh, they were way behind. Canada invented debit, I'm pretty sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It seemed pretty normal to us like 15 years ago, but actually the rest of the world was kind of just figuring it
Way
out.
behind.
I guess so, yeah. Yeah.
It seems like something that's always been around.
It does. It does, but no.
Yeah. That's fucking... That's really odd.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very weird to me.
Well, you know, I mean, if you want to look at it on the bright side, they're very vigilant with their cash. You know, they know where their cash is. They like to keep it close to them. They like to, you know, that's fine. I don't mind that.
They're weird fake money.
Yeah, they're weird fake. Yeah.
That
They're
rips way too easily.
fucking monopoly money. Well, if you're going to make your money out of pure paper, that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you can't just make your money out of paper.
Oh, man. I've had so many American $1 bills just deteriorate into nothing into my pocket.
Yeah, yeah. You don't want to put American money in the washing machine accidentally. That's going to be the end of your Alexander Hamilton there.
It's brutal.
Your Ulysses S. Grant. I wonder when. By the way, I wonder when they're. So they're starting to take down the statues now.
Mm-hmm.
How long is it until they start to rethink the money?
Yeah, like
Right?
taking people off of it.
Well, you know, in Virginia, this past week, there was a statue of George Washington that was defaced.
Uh-huh.
Right? George
Yeah.
Washington's on the $1 bill.
So they might want it off the
Right.
$1 bill.
Alexander Hamilton. There was a
Uh-huh.
huge stink over Hamilton. Ulysses Grant was a Confederate general, I'm pretty sure. See, I don't know
enough.
I
I
don't
don't
know-
know enough of.
I don't know
history.
American history very well, arguably, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ben Franklin was a slave owner,
Mm-hmm.
right?
A lot of them were because they were the products of the time.
Yes.
So I mean,
This is
how
what-
are you
this
going
is-
to get
this,
away
This
from
is
that?
very okay, but this is good. This is what I'm talking about here. This is the meat on the bones here of a conversation that really is just dying to be had, but is being blocked out by the mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
What good is it attacking statues as a physical representation of things that have concretely happened in the past? I don't personally understand what the outcome of it is. I understand that they symbolize the negative aspects of American history. However negative they are, it's American history nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's happened in the United States of America has culminated in has fomented in the institution that the United States as a whole has become. It is a sum of its history. You can't ignore that. What you can do is try to learn from history as to not repeat the mistakes and to make the future better. But I don't understand how attacking physical apparatus like structures, whether it be architectural monuments or whether it be statues, how that's actually getting to the point of...
But they want to get rid of all those people in history books as well. They want to literally get rid of the history of it. That's not going to actually solve anything.
Let's do a thought exercise about this for a minute, okay? Because I think that a lot of these people that are going full steam ahead with this idea aren't contemplating the end. Okay, so here's the end, and I want to present this to people who at John Smith or whoever might be listening. It's, in the end of this erasure of history, your country will effectively have no history.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's not possible to not have a history. You have to have a story, whether it be a myth or a recollection of facts that have led you to a point. does this mean that we now have a blank palette to recreate American history?
I think that's what they want.
Could we say that a bunch of fucking fairies with wands landed on the east coast of, you know, the United States in 1492, and you know, like how?
Don't
how-
even have to set a date
I don't
for
even
it.
understand how. Like no.
If you're really gonna get rid of all of American history, then you could just say America started in 2020, and it has always been this utopia of multiculturalism.
In history books, the chapter will be called "The Great Awakening."
The Great Awakening. It'll be one page. It'll be a pamphlet because there's fucking no substance there. There's not enough to even make a book. But that's what they want to do, you know? I mean, like, you're a lot more versed in Chinese history than I am. But I brought this up before to some of my friends, talking how similar this reaction to American history is the same way Mao had with reshaping China. Like, is that what they're trying to do here? Just destroy American history so they can recreate it in some weird, like, communist version of
It doesn't
getting rid of money, getting rid of status, getting rid of
but
land ownership, like
okay,
to make some kind of
you
new
ask
utopia.
you
like,
ask larger questions, but like
I mean, that's going. Yeah, I definitely
Who's
asked
your-
a lot of broad questions. There,
who's
but
your one? Who's like? I mean, who benefits from what you're proposing?
whoever is at the head of this movement clearly is going to be the head honcho. You know,
One guy
some guy.
sitting on his couch eating potato chips.
There's got to be a Mao out there.
There's got to be a Mao.
There's got to be somebody out there. Like I don't think it's a leaderless movement like a lot of political pundits like to say. Like if you agree with CNN, then this is just random people working on their own volition. But clearly, if you're going to have massive gatherings like this, someone's making that happen.
Yeah.
Someone's organizing it.
Yeah.
So those people are definitely pushing a narrative there. Maybe they're pushing for these weird Maoist ideas.
Well,
In a way.
I mean, it would all depend on like who benefits from it. Like, so you know, Maoism. If you were to look at like Maoism, I highly doubt you'd find a grassroots organization who would subscribe to the ideas of communism, but wholesale take into account, you know, the experience of China during the Great Leap Forward. I'm not really sure if you're going to find a lot of grassroots organizations which are going to say, yeah, you know, Mao did the right thing.
But there are communist parties.
Yes, but they're not going to...
Like third parties, they are actually a thing.
Yeah, well, I'm not... Okay.
There's a Communist Party of Canada.
So if you were to ask the Communist Party of Canada if they agree that what Mao did in the Great Leap Forward was justified or not, you're probably going to get a fractive answer. I highly doubt...
Oh, they would probably say, no, we don't want that kind of communism.
100%.
But then the fact is, when you implement your version of communism, is it really going to be any better? Because usually it doesn't work out in the people's favor.
No, it depends. It depends where you go. So communism has been practiced in Cuba since the Castro Revolution in the 60s. And communism has...
Sure, and people were executed in that regime.
They had to be.
Apparently.
Well, no, they had to be.
Had to
right?
be?
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. This is the ugly part of politics that when you talk about it honestly, people are like, what? Yeah. Yeah, they had to be. They're purveyors of a different ideology, and if they're left unchecked, they're going to end up going to you know. So you got to keep in mind that in the 40s and the 50s, the relationship between the United States, especially the elites in the United States and Cuba, was such that the Americans owned pretty much all the prime real estate in Cuba, including in Havana.
Right.
had a casino capitalist economy, and it was the revolutionaries who had to kick them out to
Yeah.
change the exploitative qualities.
It was the major reason for the
Well,
revolution, right?
a fundamental, a pro-nationalist voice necessarily intersects with this internationalism that Cuba had been experiencing for the past 20 or 30 years, which hadn't been benefiting the average Cuban, by the way, to any extent. Right. So,
No.
so Castro comes in with his, Bolivarian, Che Guevarian, ideals. If you're to leave people in cabinet who are still sympathetic to the previous regime, you're going to end up with rebellion. You're going to end up with rebellion. You're going to end up with a fractional government, and you're going to end up with an American invasion, like similar to what you did, but it probably succeeds because you have internal help, right? And you'll see this time and time again when regimes change all over the world. Often, one of two things are going to happen: the leaders of the former regime are either going to be captured and killed, or they're going to be sent into exile. And that has not changed for hundreds of years. It honestly is not. That's the political playbook when there is an overturning, right? A lot of people don't know right now that there was a coup in Bolivia. It was perpetuated by the CIA. This was only a year ago too. Perpetuated by the CIA, who infiltrated grassroots organizations with radical activists to take radical action in their protests against the government, which was led by an agrarian leader named Evo Morales. Right? So strong that coup was, and so convinced Morales was that the CIA was basically going to off him, that he fled into exile into Mexico. And a lot of people don't know that.
I've never heard of it.
That's the power that the American Secret Service holds over the majority of the Western Hemisphere, at least. Right?
Okay.
The power to move political mountains.
Yeah, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely. You're talking about a country right now, the United States right now. They have the hubris to, to qualify this point with a backstory, is they can't stand Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela.
Right.
Can't stand the guy. He doesn't play the game. He's not playing the game the right way. He plays the game like Muammar Gaddafi played in Libya. So they don't like him. They've been hitting Venezuela with sanctions for the last 20 years. Venezuela, before the sanctions were imposed, was probably the richest country in South America. This also sounds very familiar because Libya, before the bombing and the ousting of Gaddafi, was the richest country in Africa. Right? Mm-hmm. There's no small coincidence that the richest countries were the ones that exerted their independence against the American petrodollar. But that shit can't go on for very long. The hubris of one country to say, well, the elected leader of a country is still alive and in parliament in his own country, to actually adopt a secondary leader from a removed position and say, no, actually, we recognize this leader as the leader of that country. Can you imagine? And you know what? The degree to which our society accepts the exploitation and the overall subversion of other ways of being without questioning the actions of our governments is, to me, as a student of international relations, astounding. If there's anything that we should be up in arms about, it's things like this, where we're around the world talking about how we're trying to spread our values, democracy and freedom and all this shit. That couldn't be further from the truth. It couldn't be further from the truth. It's absolute nonsense. It ignores the fact that other leaders and other people in other countries deserve the right to choose their own political representation, to choose their own forms of government, to choose what works for them. It ignores the possibility that there's many ways to look at politics and not just one. So every time we come across a leader like, Nicolas Maduro or Muammar Gaddafi or Bashar al-Assad or, God forbid, the Ayatollah of Iran, who try to even stand up to us in a capacity that says we're exerting our independence because we're noticing you're imposing on us, for us to just accept that narrative unquestionably is very
Mm.
troubling to me. It's very problematic to me, you know. And it's you know, no matter who you talk to now, it just seems like there's certain things that are going on in the world that are just kind of taken for a given. We don't really address the real issues of the world. We're kind of skirting around them. Right? Black lives do matter, don't get me wrong, but the world does not stop when the coronavirus hits. The world does not stop when George Floyd gets his neck kneeled on. There is shit going on out there. It is real, and unfortunately, as much as it hurts me to say this, the things that are going on behind the curtains are actually far more detrimental to our ways of life than what these protesters are protesting right now. Yeah. How's that for a long-winded way of getting back to the whole Black Lives Matter and
Long-winded way.
the difference between superficial and total understanding of why one stands where they stand?
Perfect.
Yeah, sure. I don't know.
I mean, like, what do you make of the world right now with all of our different political systems? Is there a way of everything working out harmoniously? Could every country have their own way of doing it, and it all kind of works out, or are we plagued with this old world thinking that everyone has to be democracy, or everyone has to be communist, or everyone has to be socialist?
Okay, so
Or, to add on to that, is there a way of amalgamating all different types of ideologies and then turning it into some type of hybrid that actually works for the globe in general?
I would be. It's a very troubling thing. I think there's probably a lot of people who want to believe in the idea of a one-size-fits-all policy, but the truth is that's how we got into this mess that we're in right now. It's this this imposition of one-size-fits-all policies for every country. We got into this problem in the 80s when we were so in the 1980s. You know, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, for example, were very, very 70s and 80s, maybe even the late 60s, were very, very instrumental in giving these, extremely high quantity loans to countries that probably should have never, had the right to have that money if the whole goal was to pay it back and all this, right? But part of that was that the loan was structured in a way that was guaranteed that it would fail. And I mean, this was like the blueprint. Okay. So first of all, you oust any democratically, like let's take Africa, for example, in the late 60s. Okay. The game plan is first of all, you go in and your secret services, they scope out the country and they find out what's driving the political system, what the main logics are, what the main ideologies are, what the main views are, what the main group of political ideologists are, what the opposition is, right? They will find a way to either pay off the institution to be more amenable to their own views, i.e. the American foreign intelligence views, foreign policy views, or if they can't convince a large enough number of people through bribery, they will oust the leader and impose a new leader. And this happened in so many different countries in Africa where the ruling colonial country didn't like the leader, deposed the leader, instated a leader that was much more amenable to the program, so to speak, right? But these people, they already knew that they were setting up the terms to fail. So you've got this corrupt government now that's working with you. That corrupt government is siphoning money out of the natural economy. The economy is going broke. And you've got only one option as an African country now, to turn to the international institutions for loans. So a lot of these African countries, under the guidance of American colonialism and European colonialism, were actively asking for loans from the international institution, knowing full well they had no intention. The corrupt governments had no intentions of paying them back. The incompetent ones would squander away the money, and they would be forced to accept what was called conditionality. Conditionality means, it's called restructuring or structural agreements. Okay, so if you fail to meet the terms of your loan, i.e. the payback rate, the rate of payback and all that, you're subject to a certain number of conditions, and those conditions are basically adopting principles that will benefit international, multinational Western corporations. So removing restrictions on all multinationals that want to do business inside of your country. So this is how they start to get into your economy now. You start to see the tentacles, the long tentacles of how they get in there, right? It doesn't look nefarious on the surface. But now they're saying, okay, you failed to pay back your loan. So as part of as part of your failure to pay back your loan, you have to meet these structural conditions in order to keep getting the money. And basically, that was Western liberal, adopt this Western neoliberal, economy and liberal. Oh my God, there's a raccoon there! Holy shit! Wow, that is crazy. What's up, buddy? So we had a little raccoon visitor. We still do. There he is. Oh, he's hungry. He's coming in. He's not taking no for an answer.
He smells the kitchen.
Oh my, look at him. He's just a baby. Just a baby raccoon. Yeah, you are. Oh my God, there's two of them.
Oh no, they're trying to get in. I gotta fix this problem.
We'll take a short commercial break, and we'll get back to you after the raccoons are gone.
Hang out with our new buddies. Yeah. Okay, we're back. We figured out the raccoon issue.
That was a
they tried to get in. We had to close the window a little bit, so
not once but twice.
Yeah,
those are persistent raccoons.
No, we've been at this for hours.
Yeah,
battling the raccoons.
Anyways, yeah. So.
But anyway.
So yeah, no. I mean, we were talking before we got cut off there. We were talking about how Western countries had imposed control over their colonial and former colonial ownings after the late 60s and the 70s, and so a lot of these countries were forced into taking loans that they would never be able to pay back, or their governments were too corrupt because they were bought out by their former colonial masters to actually give a shit about paying it back. So as part of the program, considered the fail state. So, if the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have given a country loans of any amount, part of the conditionality that gets attached to that loan is what happens if you fail to pay back the loan under its terms, right? Mm-hmm. And these countries have basically been set to fail in terms of their loan obligations, specifically so that they could, so that the neoliberal prescription of reorganizing their economy could be imposed on them, right? So there are so many countries in Africa, some in the Middle East that really kind of fell into this trap for a long period of time. There were other countries which were trying very vehemently to uprise against it, and in those countries, right. Yeah. So we started off by asking, like, you asked me a very valid question. You asked me, is it possible for multi-systems to exist, whether it be political or economic? Is it possible for a country like China? I see where your ultimate question is going. Is it possible for a country like China with its current political and economic climate to reconciliate those differences with another country and be able to get on with those? My answer is yes. My answer has always been yes. And I mean, the reason why I say yes is because when I look at geopolitics since World War II, let's take geopolitics since World War II. There have been a number of small clashes between countries throughout the world. Very small clashes, really. Not as far as I know. I shouldn't say this outside of the United States and England, there haven't been wars. Now that's a very prominent thing, because to answer your question, the answer is pretty simple, but the explanation is very deep. So in order for the world to be able to get along under what would be called a multipolar system, where there were multiple power centers in the world, not just one that had a monopoly on, militaristic power and, economic power like the United States does today, but right. Multipolar in a sense, right? I believe firmly that with the fall of the American Empire and the emergence of the next you know, whatever you want to call it, power, so to speak. I'm not going to call it a power. I don't know what the dynamic would look like. It will change the way that different countries will be able to relate to one another. Because right now we're stuck in a vortex of one country impossibly trying to impose their way of seeing things on every country with a full military budget, and a full military will to get it done, not caring how many people have to die in the process.
Do it their way or the highway.
Do it their way or the highway.
Yeah.
And there's only one or two countries, the United States and England, for my money, that are acting like this in the world. The rest of the countries in the world, they have conflicts. Like right now, a lot of people don't know. There is an autonomous region that's sitting between China. I can't remember the name of it right now. There's an autonomous region that's sitting between China and India right now, for example. And there was a conflict that broke out there that resulted in 20 Indian soldiers being killed. This was a military conflict. 20 Indian.
In the Himalayas?
Well, it is in the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Right? But it's in this autonomous region that China claims administration over, that India claims territorial rights to. So they had a clash and a conflict. It resulted in 20 Indian soldiers being dead, an untold number of Chinese soldiers dying. There were casualties, but they didn't really reveal them.
Yeah.
These conflicts, they exist, but there's no hot war going on between any other country on the fucking planet and another country. Russia's not out there warring with, fucking Saudi Arabia. It's Israel and Palestine are actually still not physically at war. They hate each other because of ideological differences that create an apartheid, but they're not at war. They're not. Nobody outside of the United States and England are at war with anybody on the planet. So you got to ask yourself one thing: is it an ideology? Is the ideology of liberalism, is this confluence of capitalism and democracy, is this actually what's driving the war machine and thus major conflict around the world? My answer is yes. If you were to remove those influences from the international system, I would surmise that the international system would be a much more peaceful forum, a much more engaging one, one where we could get issues that are as large as, I don't know, say the environment.
Or is it possible the history of England and the States is what's pushing this forward? The imperialism.
Well, listen, England.
That urge to continue dominating.
England wasn't an organic imperial power, much like the United States was in its infancy. The very foundation, the imperialism in its very foundation, is ingrained into the American experience, right? You had to enslave tens of thousands of black people from West Africa to work the cotton plantations. That was the beginning of your economy. You had to rob land that was rightfully owned by other people to create your colonies. From the very, very beginning of the American experiment, it was imperialism and conquest. It's deeply ingrained into the fabric of Americana, what it means to be American. Yeah,
and also the idea of manifest destiny.
You got to keep in mind,
right?
Keep in mind that England was a nothing for hundreds of years. That they spoke French for a few hundred years there because they were a fucking vassal state of France, right? They didn't start off with the same imperial, it wasn't like that. They kind of became something that they really weren't to begin with, whereas America was really founded on that.
Okay.
Right. So yeah, I think history, but this is a very important point, going back to, tearing down and rewriting our history. If we didn't have history, how are we learning from these things?
True.
So
then you would restart the cycle, essentially. If you took down history, what would happen?
You'd recreate history, but instead
a lot of people think that you would create some type of utopia, but then how can you ever learn from the mistakes if you don't have history?
You'll never learn if you don't have precedent to look back on. The very same way that in your family, your parents teach you what's right and wrong. How do your parents teach you what's right and wrong? Because they've been there and they've experienced it.
Right.
And they have the ability to inscribe on you what's right and what's wrong. If you're an orphan and you never had parents, you'd grow up as whatever you wanted to be. Maybe you wanted to be a bank robber. Who's there to tell you couldn't do it?
Yeah, true.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's no different on the individual level or on a societal level. It all operates the same. Mm-hmm. The psychology of it is all the same.
Yeah, it's information handed down over generations.
That's right.
That kind of form
That's right.
certain things.
Yeah. Even your
Form a
even
society.
your genetics inform who you are over the course of hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Everything is everything is a culmination of historical events, right? The very fact that you and I are sitting in these seats right now is a culmination of historical events, probably bad ones. Like in my view, my family probably my dad's side of my family probably got kicked out of Ireland because he was chased out by the monarchy. His family was chased out by the monarchy, right? So yeah, so you know, there's, but how am I supposed to erase that and still be who I am?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense.
I think it's a very like naive and kind of like happy way of thinking of the world as like you can just destroy all history or replace it with your own version of things to just make yourself feel better.
Allow me to
In a way.
allow me to pontificate. We get to the full logical extension of what's happening right now. Every Confederate monument in the United States, every colonialist monument across Europe and in Canada get torn down. Every book gets burned. Okay? What happens? Where do we go from here? What's our new history? Are we like what's our new history?
You'd have to start with like year zero. I mean, or like I said earlier, it would be like it would just be like a pamphlet that said year 2020. That's the first year of the West or something, you know?
Yeah.
And then you start from there and try to figure out some way of going forward.
This reminds me.
I don't exactly know what they would try to do or people would try to fix because, I mean, if you get rid of history, then you have to get rid of politics, and then you have to figure out a new way of governing your countries. But then what are those countries? Because there is no history. So now it's just land masses, and now you have to account for everything that happens and all the people in those land masses.
Yeah.
So we're basically creating Oceania, and
so you're kind of touching
Yeah.
on the point I want to make is that a deconstruction of history necessarily implies a deconstruction of the current. So everything that you know that's been informed by your past, including your country, everything it means, everything has to be rethought, reimagined. Nothing can be taken as literal. Nothing that you know now. You've been exposed to the light. Somebody pulled you out of the cave for a minute, right? And you're being exposed to the light. And it's your moment to decide whether or not what you're being presented with is truth or not, or whether you want to run back into the cave to what you know.
Right.
Right? So, but here's what I was going to get at. I think this was the bigger point, is that once these woke people get to the point where they've destroyed every physical monument and they've burned every book, it's not going to be enough. They're going to get to the end of it, and they're going to realize that there's this emptiness.
Right.
Right? It was the action that was actually fulfilling them. So they're going to have to go looking for other things to destroy. They're going to have to go looking for other things to revise. They're not going to stop at anything until every element of everything that we've ever known is completely sanitized. And at that point, we've reached a point of complete self-censorship that we've imposed upon ourselves. Not being able to tell the truth about nothing, not our present, not our future, not our past. All lies all the time. And people are running full steam ahead to this reality. And it's not good.
So you don't think any of these people are they could possibly be qualified to actually run a country or change anything?
Who's they? Wait, who's they?
These woke people.
No, I don't think they're qualified to run most of them.
So
right
all
now.
they're doing is destroying.
They're not trying to. I think what they think that they're
unintentionally.
Unintentionally, yes.
Destroying.
Yes. It's
But thinking that
it's
they're
the same
fixing
way.
problems.
So I was talking to you about a story. We were at a diner during the winter, and there's this girl there that is going to my university. She's going for political science. She's in her third year. I'm removed 3 years, 2 years, 3 years from McMaster at this point, right? From university at this point. But she is of the opinion that So we get in this discussion about what type of speech is acceptable and what type of speech is not acceptable on university campuses. And my argument was, regardless of how unpalatable the speech is that's coming out of your mouth or somebody's mouth, you don't have the right to be offended by it. The right to somebody's free speech, and this is an integral component to our individual rights and freedoms as human beings. You may not always like the things that people are saying. Believe me, you're not going to like them. You know, in a 4-hour podcast, how many things are you going to listen to as a listener and say, I don't agree with them on that? That's fine. You know,
it's all fine.
But it's the way in which we've gone about censoring speech that we don't like. And so many young people now are all about it. So I don't like that speech. We're going to shut it down. But this is this is an example of people that think they're doing good that are actually driving us down a hole, right? They think they're doing good. Oh, we can just get rid of all speech we don't agree with. Well, that first of all, who's you, and do you represent everybody?
Yeah, what's your authority on this situation?
This is something liberals forget a lot. There's a lot of other people. I'm not saying I'm not, right wing. I'm not left wing. Okay, that ship has sailed for me, motherfucker. I'm independent now. I don't care. I've seen what's going on now. I'm not going to buy into this shit. But
you can't play the sides game these days because even if you're a moderate, it's like you're a Nazi.
But there's a delicious irony to the fact that the liberals, the people who would believe in the upholding, who would be most staunch defendants of people's rights and freedoms and rights, are now the proponents of woke culture and cancel culture and censorship and all of these things that are happening right now that are confusing the shit out of people. On top of that, not the least of which is spreading misinformation. This is a real problem. It's beer. It's a real show, I'm going to crack mine open too. I really don't care. You know what? It's going to be better when we get a camera in here because at least people can see us cracking our beers and it doesn't sound like it's just something that's going on in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, fucking right.
Trying to minimize the noise.
Yeah. But
the cracking process.
But go back to what we were saying. I jumped my thought there because of your cracking of the beer.
My bad.
Yeah. Well,
that's what I do. Yeah. Destroy conversations.
Yeah. No.
That's the whole point.
There's no destroying the conversation. It gets back to that organic point. Like just go back and make the point, and then you probably have something to say on top of it. It's just that these people, they even the young people, the people that consider themselves social justice warriors, these people that think they're doing, they think they're doing yeoman's work in social growth and shit, Yeah. They're actually pushing us back further. You could not know who you are without knowing what you were opposed to.
Yeah.
And the other point of teaching that I often give people, even though it's not my right to teach people at my age anything, although, whatever, is that you owe it to yourself to always see two sides of things. You don't have to agree. I mean, I'm not even just saying two sides. I'm multiple sides of an issue. Don't ever get into an issue on one side and then just go looking on YouTube for affirmation. You'll find it everywhere. You'll end up in a goddamn bubble where the only reality you can accept is the one that you've now created for yourself. Whereas if you consider yourself open to multiple potentialities, to the idea that maybe the first thing you hear about something may not be the truth, maybe you need to go and explore a little bit further, that's something that is human nature, and you should be exercising that any chance you get. But as it gets back to, the discussion I'm having with this girl, it's like, I can't tell you that it's a good idea to have an objecting opinion in a university. University campuses used to be, if anything, a platform for debates. That's really, like, before a lot the public en masse would be able to afford to get into university, it would be like an exclusive Ivy League club for debaters and shit like that. Like, that's what it was.
Yeah, it's not supposed to be a safe space.
It's not supposed to be a safe space.
It's supposed to be a place where your ideas are questioned consistently.
Unfortunately,
it's something that Jordan Peterson brought up. It's like
it was
because when he was starting to get popular because of all those protests against him at the University of Toronto. People were saying, "You're destroying our safe space," and he's like, "This is a university.
Yeah.
Like, this is supposed to be the highest."
Well, do you know
Like
what
echelon
you know what
of
happened,
education, like you should be questioned on everything.
You know
you're
what
doing.
happened, right? So for a long time, the university campus was seen as a place where emotionally and intellectually mature people were sent, the brightest of your society, so to speak, were sent to finish their schooling. A lot of these people, they were the most rational of their classmates. They were good forward thinkers. They were open-minded. They exhibited all the characteristics of what you would consider to be an ideal university student. Since the floodgates have opened, since they basically allowed any Tom, Dick, and Skylar into their programs, now you have a huge underclass of society that's pushing these social agendas on university campuses.
Right.
Yes, it's absolutely true.
Do you think it's like a marketing tactic for
I would
the
need
for
you
the,
to
u- the
elaborate.
for the colleges and universities? Like, they're being more woke in order to get more people into the colleges, because at their bottom line, they're trying to make money here.
Yeah.
So if they can get as many people thinking that it's a safe space and all these woke people can come in, they're actually just capitalizing on this.
Well, I don't know if that's the game plan, but I know it's
I don't know. It might, like, it's probably unintentional,
Yeah.
but it's like any business. You're going to roll with whatever's popular
well.
in order to make as much money
I'll
as
tell you.
possible.
I'll tell you what. Indifference is still considered acceptable, but ignorance is not. So they had two cards to play. They could fully embrace these new movements as a body, or they could tolerate them, which some universities have chosen to do. That were indifferent, but they sure as hell could not say no. So you were left in a position as an institution. You had a choice. You could allow it to happen. You could embrace it happening, or that was it. You deal with it, right? There was no in between. So yeah. I mean, in a way, it has ended up tangentially benefiting them. I think. I really do. You can't go. You can't make 10 steps in.
Because at the end of the day, they're collecting money from these people, from these kids.
Yeah.
That don't know any better.
No.
And thinking they're getting an education. Yeah,
absolutely.
But you're still paying a lot of money for it. Not so much here in Canada, but in the States, oh my God, I feel bad for those kids that are getting duped out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. For something that's never going to benefit them for the rest of their life.
It makes perfect sense if the return on your investment justified the investment itself. But like, if you're doing human resource management for 5 years in the U.S. and your job market is very small, and your expected income upon graduation is like $35,000. I mean, do the math, right? There's, to me, American people are suffering the worst of hypercapitalism. You look at it across all markets. You look at it, in the the medical industries, pharmaceutical industries. You see it in the education. They seem to be being hypercapitalized more than any other country. Their government has provided less fail-safes for the average human being than any other country in the civilized world. And it's becoming very obvious now, right? And God help all those people that are affected by the incompetence. I just want to make one point about this too. This is not something that is a partisan issue. This is not something where I want to hear somebody telling me how bad Donald Trump is in a line at Walmart. I don't care. This is a deeply rooted American institutional problem. And it transcends multiple governments, multiple regimes. It's a program. The face changes, but the program doesn't. And that's the truth. I don't care to hear liberals slander Trump. I don't care to hear Republicans slander Obama. I don't give a shit. To me, they're all the same. Right? When we're reducing ourselves to partisan politics, that's when we're merely monkeys talking on a microphone. As far as I'm concerned, we're not getting anywhere. Right.
Oh, definitely.
The hard-fought
sure.
conversations that you'd have with an American who truly believes in this red-blue division, and
Right.
religious divisions, and economic divisions, and
And thinking that they're getting somewhere with that.
absolutely,
But it's so
absolutely.
clearly rigged.
Yeah.
Like, clearly nothing is really happening. I mean, one thing that is interesting about Trump is that he should, from all accounts, he should not have been president. It doesn't make any sense, but he was the outlier, and of course he had money, so he was able to actually do it. Because most people can't,
Well, okay.
The average American cannot run
Well,
for the presidency because
and
it
also-
would cost so much fucking money.
but
to do.
also though, I want to make a point about that. Also, you had Michael Bloomberg on the liberal side that proved that clearly money wasn't the only motivator. Right? You have this guy who's got billions of dollars. He's throwing down hundreds of millions of dollars a week in advertising campaigns to try to buy his way into the presidency, and it doesn't have the same effect. So you can look at it and say, sure, it has to do with money, but money may only be one part of it. Right? Donald Trump represents a very, very deep distrust of institutions on behalf of the average American. He represents a diversion point, an obvious diversion point from the American political elite and the institution that most Americans now realize that there is no divide at the top. Reds and Blues, they play golf with each other on Saturday afternoon. They spend
for
all
sure.
week selling you on the idea that their opinions about the way the country should be governed are so different, and yet they're not. They're exactly the same.
Yeah, they don't actually want to help the people at all.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty clear. I mean, I was still living with you during the last election.
Roommates.
Yeah, way back. And I remember the night of the election, and it was just completely insane.
Who was the only person that wasn't shocked?
You?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Crazy.
Well, you
right?
said it. You said
I was
it.
like, there's no way they're gonna vote for Trump or anything like that. But we were like watching the coverage for, entire year basically
Yes.
nonstop
Yes.
until that happened, and we were both thinking that of course they're gonna vote for Bernie Sanders because of course it's
Yeah.
gonna make sense. But
That's right.
sitting here as like Canadians, it's like, well, that's the best option. Like any Canadian would vote.
Well,
for Bernie Sanders.
we got fooled into our bubble too. I mean,
Yeah.
you're always from time to time you're always going to get caught in a bubble once in a while, and you're going to be like,
Yeah.
ha, you got me that time.
Ah, right.
I mean,
right.
Bernie
They don't think the same way.
Bernie Sanders got me twice.
I can't believe it. I mean,
Fool me twice.
like he tried to run a second time, but
Well, you know what?
He did not even fucking try.
As a
second time around.
as a product, as a product of a political movement, he's actually just the face of something that's much bigger than him. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's this whole movement behind Bernie Sanders. It's called Our Revolution. And Our Revolution basically takes, donations to help get I don't think he's back. I don't think he's
It's good. It's all
yeah.
right.
It helps take donations from everyday donors, just like the Bernie Sanders campaign, and then to divert those funds to helping progressive candidates win in state seats and in governing seats all over the country. So it's actually part of a bigger movement. And since the coronavirus, pandemic, surfaced in late February, there's been a number of progressive candidates which have actually stolen seats from established Democrats. So the movement is working. Like the grassroots disillusionment, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. The willpower to actually do something about it is there. So
in a way, the Bernie Sanders campaign actually did something.
in
worked.
a manner of speaking, it started the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he was saying things that a lot of Americans were thinking of and wanted.
Yes.
I mean, like universal health care,
Yes.
all this shit. Everything that the rest of the West has,
But
those are all good things.
so powerful are the tools of American propaganda that even Americans are convinced that voting in their common interest is asinine.
Yes. It's insane down there.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, everyone else in the West loves to poke fun at the States because of how backwards they are.
Yes.
But there are a lot of good things about the States as well.
Yes.
but it's still kind of crazy that they're so far behind Canada and Europe with just basic human rights.
Well,
All in the sake of, I guess, just like the American dream of like just work hard, dude, and you can be a fucking millionaire.
it's hard to say you're behind something if you're not aspiring to get to that place. So if America
True.
never aspired to be a better country, if it never aspired to be like European countries or Canadian countries, it's not it's not backwards at all. It's its own way of being progressive, I guess.
That's a good way of putting it. Actually, I never thought of that.
Well, that's
yeah.
how
If they never want to be like Switzerland, then I guess they won't,
that's right.
because that's not their.
And
that's not the plan.
Part of the the sort of manifest destiny ideology is we don't owe our survival, our independence to anybody, which transcends into the psychology of how to govern a country and stuff like that. They don't want to follow a lot of other countries in their footsteps or what they're doing. They have no interest in doing that. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, because in their mind, they think that they're still like the leaders.
Yeah. But when you have a very, very, the political establishment in the U.S., this is a very highly affluent class of individuals. They don't live their day-to-day life similar to the people whose lives they have decision-making power over. So there's a huge disconnect between. It's not like the fucking Prime Minister of Iceland who lives in a friggin' house halfway between Reykjavik and the next town, and you can go knock on his damn door and have a chat with him every day. Like, the political elites of this country are, for their own reasons, necessarily removed from the riff-raff of society. They have to become more and more removed from the riff-raff so that they can keep telling themselves in their mind that the idea of, Americanism represents something that's prosperous, something that should be continued. It's a program that should be continued, right?
Yeah, so they're turning themselves into the ruling class.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
There has been a ruling.
So then America becomes like a tier system.
Well, I mean, in a lot of ways it already was.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, in a lot of ways it already was. Like, you can't
like the plebs, and then
Oh yeah, for sure.
and then the middle class.
Well,
And
if
then
you're
the ruling elite.
if you're the ultra riche, the plebs and the middle class are all the same.
True.
Right? You're not looking at the middle class as some separate entity. You're just looking at them as there's an underclass and a ruling class. That's if you're at the top, that's the way you're looking at the world.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that ruling class represents maybe a probably like 10,000 people in the entirety of the United States. So just to give you an understanding of how imbalanced things are, you're talking the ruling class comprising 10,000 people and the underclass comprising 340 million.
Now, does that incorporate billionaires as part of the ruling class?
For me, this is kind of a stupid thing. I don't think anybody ever becomes a billionaire if they're not already with the program. I honestly don't think anybody ever becomes a billionaire. I don't think they become a billionaire and thus get it incorporated into the program. I think they're part of the program, thus become a billionaire. So I think it's the orange before the apple, so to speak. Yeah, I do.
I would argue that some people are self-made. I mean, Paul McCartney is worth $1 billion, and I don't think he's made any shady government deals to get there.
No, you're absolutely right. He hasn't.
There's some people that have actually done that, but I would assume that most of these tech giants today have much shadier, closer ties to governments.
Yeah.
Around the world.
Oh yeah. I don't know.
It's the only way to get there.
Truthfully, I'll say this, okay? If you're gonna find one exception to that rule, that there could be just an outlier billionaire who doesn't fit this pre-prescribed program, it's definitely going to be a musician. I mean, was Michael Jackson a billionaire? Probably. I don't fucking know.
Maybe close.
Yeah, probably pretty close,
pretty
right?
Fucking close.
These people weren't part of that establishment. But you have to understand something. Like, what we're talking about here. We're not talking about a Jeff Bezos. We're not talking about a fucking Mark Zuckerberg. We're not talking about people that were hand-selected from Silicon Valley by the government to create programs which would eventually merge and acquire all of their competition to the point where they were the sole hegemon and all the information that they were collected was being used and dispersed for reasons that wasn't readily known to the end user.
You can't go from selling books to
Yep, that's right.
massive infrastructure.
That's right. Without selling
about 10 years.
without selling the NSA on a data netting strategy. Without selling the NSA on Amazon Web Services, the analytical portion of their business, which by the way comprises about 80% of their profits. How did that happen? You want to talk about front businesses? How much of a front business is a business that 20% of its entire revenue is online shopping and another 80% is selling analytical data? That's
it's crazy.
That's not right.
When you look into like what Amazon actually is, they work at like a net loss, and then their affiliate companies actually make the money.
Yes. Yeah.
So the business everyone knows Amazon as is just a front.
Yes, it's a shell corporation.
To be able to
it's
do all of these
It's a shell
things.
corporation.
Yeah.
In circumstances less than complete, how would you get? It's kind of hard to explain. In circumstances where a business is left to itself to fail or succeed, Amazon would have failed 20 years ago, 12 years ago, or whenever, 12 to 15 years ago. It would have failed before it started to become an online everything store. Right? Any other business that was an organic model, like me and you start Joe Shopper tomorrow, right? And the first thing we need to do to expand our online presence and our advertising is to go looking for people who believe in our idea. How are we selling those people on our idea? We're giving them a business plan. What does that business plan entail? It's an itemized inventory of all our perceived expenses, all our perceived incomes, and our timeline of income and revenue generation. That means at X point, be it 3 years or 5 years, this is where we expect to start to turn a profit and move this way. Well, Amazon was allowed a very, very long curve with its shareholders being told year after year that there would be no revenue brought back to them. Any other kind, Joe Shopping, if we went to our shareholders and said, by the way, we expect you to take 0% revenue for the next 20 years, but believe us, by year 20, we're going to be the biggest goddamn player in this market, we would already be out the door. There had to be a backdoor understanding of what Amazon would become in the future by all those people that were sitting in that room making that choice.
They had to be backed by something else.
There was a guarantee
to be able to prove what
there
they
was
were
an
actually
investment guarantee. Okay, and that guarantee was likely the government guaranteeing all those shareholders that a return on their investment. Maybe not right away, but they knew after they had spent billions and billions and billions of dollars basically building outwards that eventually once the outward building was done, that they would be basically it would be a monopoly market player and they would be getting their percentage of the profits from the entire business.
It's really shady.
It is.
But if you're going to make a business that's that big, how else are you going to do it?
Apparently, you just you start a band called the Beatles.
Yeah. Well, Paul's that rich for a reason.
Yeah, because
Ringo isn't.
Yeah, well, Ringo's a vegetable, and the other two are dead. So, sorry, Ringo, I love you. But...
Hey, Ringo's still kicking.
Yeah,
He
was always the one who wasn't allowed to talk. So
the guy looks like he's 40.
yeah.
He's fucking crazy.
He still lives in his parents' basement. It's remarkable.
His parents are 3,000 years old.
Guy hasn't aged since '84. No.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There is ways of becoming wealthy independently for sure. But if you're going to try to do something like that, where clearly I think Jeff Bezos' plan is to just conquer.
Yes.
To completely dominate all marketplaces.
Yes.
I mean, I could see in 10 years Walmart going out of business.
100%.
Because how many people actually shop at Walmart? When it's so much more convenient to get shit off Amazon.
Well,
you don't even have to leave your house, man.
It's gonna require a bunch of people who just resist for the sake of resisting. Like, for me personally, I don't see any reason to. I don't shop on Amazon. I should full disclosure. I've I think I've ordered one thing off Amazon in my entire life. And, it was only because I couldn't find it anywhere else. So,
Right.
full disclaimer.
I've had to do that too.
But
There's just some things it's like I can't find this at a store.
to your point though, brick and mortar, where is that going? Brick and mortar's going nowhere. Brick and mortar's going nowhere. Every store that tries to operate in a dual realm, be it in the physical realm and the e-realm, is all going to get played out by Amazon, who pays zero in terms of its brick and mortar physical infrastructure, other than its warehouses, which are fully subsidized by taxpayers' money, might I add. Amazon doesn't have to pay a cent in taxes or for building maintenance for like the first 15 years it moves into a new building, because every time it goes for a new contract to build a new warehouse, you've got these local governments trying to woo them in with millions of dollars of taxpayers' money, free subsidies, don't pay rent for like 3 years. It's like, you know what? Why doesn't the average, during a crisis like this, why doesn't the average consumer get why aren't they afforded such protections? Listen, you got fucked out of your job. It might take you a year to get your job back. How about this? We'll let you stay in your house rent free or mortgage free for like a year or a year and a half while you get back on your feet. You want to know something? This is the reality of our system. We have a ruthlessly capitalist survival of the fittest system for the underclass, and we have a system of socialism and wealth redistribution, siphoning wealth from the bottom to the top for the upper class. Two different systems. Two different.
Yeah, we love to pick and choose different things here.
Yeah, we have two different political systems. We have two different judicial systems. That's why nobody ever seems to go to jail when Wall Street.
Yeah, we love to give like poorer people the idea of capitalism, where it's like, hey, you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work hard, you can make it happen. And then for the wealthy elite, the narrative is just everything's going to be great. You're going to get tax subsidies. You're going to make way more money.
Well, it's inherent.
And there's a huge division.
It's
to both ideas
inherent
here.
in the message, right?
Yeah.
What do they tell us? Like, capitalism survives on consumption. Consume, consume, consume.
Yeah.
Well, at the top, do you think they're doing that? There's a reason why, like, the average pleb household has something like 3 to 4 televisions, flat screen televisions. The average rich person has one. You would you would think that.
I don't know about that.
No, I don't know. There's been studies about it.
You ever seen MTV Cribs?
Well, you listen again. You're talking about a class of underclass people that got rich. I want to make this very.
Okay.
I want to make this very clear to you. Okay. Yeah. When you're talking about musicians, almost zero of these musicians started from a point where they were so affluent that this was their life. Right? So, of course, when they get money, they're going to adopt this
buy a bunch
15
of shit.
Cars and fucking, you got a 30-room mansion and shit. That's what plebs do.
Yeah.
As soon as we get money.
That's what people think they have to do.
Dude, as soon as we get money, we give it right back. Rich people don't get rich by doing that. Rich people get rich by saving their shit.
It's true.
That's the difference. Like, yes, I get it. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, yeah.
Well, then how do you explain Bill Gates' submarine?
I'm not even going to quantify that with an answer. I don't know what the fuck is going on here.
Well, he has a personal submarine. Apparently, he bought it years ago. This was something I read probably 15 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's like a little personal submersible. I
don't understand how, John young Kennedy had a biplane. Thought it was great that he was out there flying. Bam, right into the fucking ocean. Kobe Bryant has a helicopter. He thought it was a good idea. Goes out on a foggy day. Boom,
Bam.
hits the side of a mountain. You know what? I'm just.
But the point is that rich people do buy crazy, stupid shit as well.
Sure. Okay,
totally.
No. But here, keep this in mind.
Maybe it's not like 1,000 TVs per household, but
absolutely not.
They buy planes
and planes. If you're
a lot of money.
If you're a fucking rich person, you're probably jet setting 250 days a year. right? Yeah, your plane has a practical use. It's not just, hey, check out my G6 on the runway. I don't use it because the fuel's too expensive. No, you're going to Jakarta. You're going to Bandung for a friggin' economic forum that weekend. Like, there's a practical use for it. And I don't want to jump to conclusion about Bill Gates' special little submarine there. I have no idea what that's all about. But I'm sure at some point he bought it because he thought that there was a practical use for it. I can't see I can't see the practical use. You can't see the practical use. No. I don't want to put words in the man's mouth. I'm just going to assume that, based on the principle of, reason, rich people use reason to govern their relationship with money, right? Or ration and reason. And I would assume that would somewhere fall. I don't know. I don't care.
Could have been some kind of a escape plan.
Yeah. Well,
that he was thinking.
There you go.
To get to his underwater sea base.
Well, when he was, in New Zealand.
Yeah, he just buys New Zealand.
Fuck. Yeah, exactly, right?
Call this computer land now.
The things you can do when you're rich.
New Zealand is now called Windows.
The
updates are brutal.
We extradited Kim.com and we stuck him in the same fucking cell as Julian Assange.
Yeah.
Take that, New Zealand.
Yeah.
Take that, computer land.
But there's definitely there's like a royalty class that treat money completely differently than if you and me became millionaires tomorrow.
It's called the rentier. The rentier class. Those people who don't make their money off of productive assets anymore, they make their money off of skimming. Right? That's all it is. There's a rentier class. Yeah, there's a huge rentier class. Those people, Donald Trump's family is part of a rentier class of individuals who built properties and skimmed money off of them. So yeah, no, it's there. It's definitely there. But like when there's the rentier class represents a huge gamut of people. Like it represents your landlord here all the way up into the people who own, fucking 5 buildings on Park Avenue. Right.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's the person that.
So the basic landlord idea where you can just have multiple properties and just use them as income.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sure. Sure. A lot of rich people bury their, if they're.
So that's the English royal family basically.
What about it? The rentier class. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So yeah. they're just skimming.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Through tax dollars and property.
Yeah,
around the world.
And through the and the other thing that's happening right now is the repatriation of tax money from other sovereign countries back to the monarchy. Right? Like the empire, the sun still doesn't set on the empire. Not economically speaking. No way. No.
Yeah.
No, they're the biggest rentiers on the planet, the English monarchy. Absolutely. Yeah, and they don't exist for any other reason except to generate a profit off of nothing. Yeah, I mean, probably serves as the
ceremonial. My ass.
Yeah, no, they're not ceremonial at all.
They're still running shit.
No, they're very active. Yeah. If they're not active directly, then the bureaucrats that represent the monarchy are. They're active writing policy, foreign policy all over the world and shit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Well, at that rate, you're protecting your interest, right? So in order to keep skimming and keep making that money, keep buying corgis for the queen.
Yeah.
You need somebody. You need to appoint somebody to make sure all the plebs are in line.
Yeah, I mean, how else can you justify $15 million worth of renovations yearly on Buckingham Palace? I mean, right? Fucking doesn't make any sense whatsoever. If they were to try to do that on English taxpayers' dollars, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Those are part of,
Will they even stop it though? I mean, people in England love the Queen.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and we
love it.
I mean, even in Canada, we fetishize this royal family. It's sick.
In such a weird way because it's just like nobody even cares.
It's sickening
in Canada. It's not the same kind of like, ooh, I love the Queen, I love the royal family. No, we don't fucking want them here.
No, it's sickening, and it's part of a bygone era where you know, in the 40s or the 50s, you could get away with gallivanting the fucking royal family around Canada on Canadian taxpayers' dollars because the majority of people were like, you know, white and, you know, Scottish, Irish, English descent. And it kind of makes it like now there's such a cultural fabric in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
These people, they don't represent anything of any value to the majority of Canadians anymore.
Not at all. I mean, like, do you think the Chinese immigrants here give two shits about the Queen?
No, I don't.
There's no reason.
It's remarkable to me that Chinese people and the Chinese government doesn't hold more resentment for the West given the turbulence of our relationship in the last couple of 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
build the railroads.
Oh, you just the level of absolute, pure, unadulterated fucking hatred for the other and the complete level of intolerance that they've been able to inculcate in the average person in the West is astounding. Like, you have to be profoundly ignorant now to not at least try to see, you know, like, the first time somebody tells you that something you don't know about is bad or horrible, you're like, first of all, I don't know about it. Second of all, I've been told it's bad. What's the first thing you do as an intelligent person? I don't know what it is, so I got to go fucking find out what it is. You do some research. Then you start to read some opinion-based things. Is this good? Is it bad? Okay. I don't buy necessarily either side of these. Maybe I want to forge my own opinion. Or maybe, I've kind of come to the conclusion that maybe these people are right about what happened based on those events or something like that. But that's not what people do anymore. You know, if your news feed isn't coming to you in 140 characters or less, it's, you know, nobody's reading it. Nobody's reading it. There's a reason why TikTok videos there's a reason why TikTok videos seldom go past 30 seconds, okay? People don't have that attention span anymore.
Yeah. I don't think you can even actually have a TikTok video that's a minute.
No, I don't think so.
It's 15 or 30.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. For a damn good reason. Nobody has the attention span.
It's not only that, you can't get across any legitimate message in that amount of time. That's the beauty.
True.
That's the beauty of the whole system. It's
you'd have to be like yelling and speaking a mile a minute
see those people
to try to get some shit out.
Do you see those people on Twitter? You look at the first message and you're like, it goes on and it stops at the end of the 140 characters. And then you look down at the bottom, it's like 1 out of 20, and you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
You just went on a 20-tweet rant, man.
Oh, God. And it's probably all garbage.
Like, this, I hate to admit
this is why I don't like Big League Chew.
Guys, I hate to admit this, okay? Please.
My name is Leroy, and I don't like Big League Chew.
Please. This is the stupidity of it, okay? You guys decided to willingly, the users of Twitter decided to willingly adopt a platform which reduced their message to a very distilled, small thing. And now you're trying to open Twitter back up to write paragraphs about it. You should have never got engaged with this fucking medium in the first place. It's not the platform that you needed to be engaged with to get your point across if you're sending out 20 tweets, 20 message tweets.
It's good for jokes, but, like, you can't. Like, people try to have fucking conversations and arguments and shit over Twitter, and, like, that's not the point.
No, it's not.
It's to make some blurb or joke, post a picture of your avocado toast, and get on with it. Like, that's the whole fucking point. But now it's just this huge thing, just like all social media, man. Like, even Instagram, it used to be post a picture, maybe a little blurb.
Yep.
Picture could be anything.
Yep.
Maybe it's avocado toast. Maybe it's something better, more intellectual. But sometimes it is food. It's evolved to the point where it's not all food now, which is kind of nice.
Yes.
But now you see people, they'll post a picture of, like, fucking nothing just to gain your attention. And then, like, a novel. They'll write a novel underneath the picture. It's like, I'm not fucking reading that. Come on.
Yeah.
You post a picture of a rock, and then you're going to go through, like, your personal story about how much this rock means to you or something.
It's really, that's the
Not
point.
that was, like, a real thing that I saw, but, like, it's
a good example.
Stuff
a good
like
example
that,
because
stuff like that comes up a lot where they're like, people are just pushing some kind of narrative.
Part of what bothers the shit out of me is the lack of content. I mean, you could write a huge paragraph about some shit, but it's void of any content whatsoever.
Yeah.
Also,
that's not what people are there for.
No.
That's like
they're there to tear each other's heads off about politics.
You're not a journalist. If I wanted to read something like that, I'd go on, like, I don't know. What's a good website for journalism now? None of them.
Yeah, none.
I think none of them.
No.
Maybe 5 years ago I would have said Vice, but now they're just like beta cucks.
Yeah, totally. That's the cool now.
It's so rude.
That's the cool norm.
Yeah,
That's the
they-
cool
They
norm.
fucking suck. They
Subservient masculinity. That's the name of the game, baby.
Well, after their CEO stepped down a few years ago, like it's just been absolute nonsense since.
Well, you know what? They're on par. They're on course with the rest of the world and how it's operating. I don't see any difference between what Vice is doing and what every other Western media outlet is doing right now. They're all getting in line. You know, there's very, very few Western media outlets which are willing or able to produce stories that are contra to the main narrative that's being presented to people on a daily basis as if it was fact. You know, that's it. We're stuck in a world now where this is the sick part of it, in my opinion, is that not only is there a singular narrative, but that narrative is built on a mountain of lies and mistruths. That's the most astounding part of this whole thing to me. Like, you know, you look at the narratives, right? You go back to the 2016 election in the United States, right? Hillary Clinton didn't win because of Russian meddling. You know, Chinese tensions in the South China Sea are because Chinese ships were getting aggressive in their own waters. It had nothing to do with us. You know,
Right.
you know, Iran doesn't belong in Syria because, you know, apparently they were invited there and the United States wasn't. We're just occupiers. It's like, you know, there's a narrative. There's an acceptable narrative to all of these stories. There's one side. There's one truth, which is a complete misinformed untruth.
There's our truth and there's the other truth.
Which is a complete lie and misinformed.
Multiple quote unquote truths
It is
that are existing.
It's
Especially like when you brought up China and the South China Sea. Like I'm always curious to know what's going on in China and how they see the world and how they're going about doing this kind of stuff, because for us in the West it's like China is always wrong.
Yes.
They never do anything right.
Nope.
And then it's like, well, clearly they're doing something right. They're very prosperous. There's 1.3 billion of them. They have a rapidly expanding middle class. They're doing something right. And it's hard to actually see how they view the world and view the future and what China plays a part in that future. I'm always curious into trying to see it from the China perspective, because you don't get an actual narrative of that. And obviously China isn't really like spreading some kind of, I don't know, narrative that they're trying to push or anything like that.
I'm sure
It's really hard to see exactly what China's trying to do here,
you could
because it's so closed off.
Yeah.
You know, and then the West is like, that's because they're fucking evil.
Well, yeah.
Don't trust the Chinese because they're fucked up
Yeah.
and they're trying to steal Taiwan. You know, and all this stuff, and it's like, what's the truth here? Because clearly they're doing something that is just like outside of our reality.
The truth is that the Chinese annexed Taiwan from the Dutch in the late 1600s. It's always been Chinese. At least since the beginning of bureaucratic administration in China, it's been Chinese. And Hong Kong was always Chinese before it was signed over as a war prize to the English during the first Opium Wars. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, but it's hard. It's like it's really when people say that China is closed off, I would say selectively. I would not say that they're completely closed off. If you're looking at it from a social media perspective, yeah, they've got their own Facebook, they've got their own Twitter, they use TikTok, they have
they made TikTok.
Well,
it's called something else.
It just goes to show you, when they create something that becomes a world sensation, they're willing to integrate themselves into it.
Yeah.
They're not going to close off from their own inventions and shit, right? So that's a positive sign.
Right.
to be honest with you, the technology might be the final barrier. It might be when enough of these Chinese startups start to create all these things that young kids find desirable or people find useful, like Zoom or whatever. That technology might facilitate the opening of the remainder of their society. It's very possible. But as far as being closed off, I would say in certain ways they are. Yeah, their internet is closed off. They have a Chinese intranet. Yeah.
Right.
That's that's a choice that was made. But I think a lot of that has to do with being very selective about what parts of American culture and American values that they let in. And I don't I started off qualifying this by talking about how American foreign policy has affected different parts of the world, almost always negatively. China's aware of that. China's aware of that, right? Like, but they also realize that American culture is a very powerful drug, right? Like Hollywood is a very, very powerful drug. Like it's got sedative effects and stuff like that. Like it's right. So they're trying to control their own traditional narrative without interference from all this American culture, because they know, for better or worse, there's going to be certain people within China that are going to adopt that American culture and then start clamoring for things that they think exist in the United States, like democracy. Ha ha ha. Give me a fucking break. Like, our system is no better or worse than the system they have. The only thing is they're honest with their citizens about what type of system they have. Ours is a facade that pretends to be one thing. On the face, it tells you it's something, and in the background, it's actually doing something different. So, I mean, the choice is yours. You're living in the same system. One's a lie. The truth is being told to you. So, you can take it with a grain of salt. And I know a lot of people probably want, well, fuck you, Neal. What do you think? What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. I'm so angry. I love my democracy and freedom. You don't have democracy and freedom. I'm sorry, you don't. You don't. You don't. Your rights are being taken away from you every single day, right? Your right to protest.
We're seeing that right now.
Your right to protest is being quashed by policemen in military garb with military vehicles and rubber bullets and tear gas, and your right to free speech is being eroded from the bottom up by freedom and speech right groups that don't want to listen to you talk about your particular point of view and your values because that it conflicts with how they feel about things. And you're being pincered everywhere in your life, and you don't realize it. But, like, you're just not going to go out on the streets and, yell a homophobic slander. You're not. There's certain things that you don't realize it, but there's certain things you're being conditioned. You're being conditioned bit by bit.
But they all kind of think that that's part of freedom.
It's not.
It's the freedom to be able to protest, the freedom to be able to.
But you don't have any right.
Cancel people.
You don't,
they think that's part of the entire idea. You have the freedom to completely destroy.
This is such an unpalatable point for a lot of people. I really don't care how many people this pisses off, but it's the honest to God truth. If somebody yells a homophobic slander in the middle of an LGBTQO parade, that's freedom of speech. It's unpalatable. It's undesirable. It makes people uncomfortable. It makes people upset.
Right.
But that isn't. It used to be what was considered to be an inalienable right. And there are so many people out there right now that are charging towards the opposite direction, who are completely unaware of the end result of all their efforts.
And you think it's people just that don't have tough skin?
No.
Because using your analogy, I think a lot of people in that group would be like, hey, look at that asshole over there.
Sure.
Back in the day. But now it's like, let's gang up on that person and destroy them.
Well, you know what the worst part is for me? Is if they were to come back, if they had entertained the idea that I just presented and they were to come back at me and physically slander me, they would actually be in the right. So I would have opened myself up to a level of criticism which would have been considered acceptable, but I wouldn't be able to deliver the criticism which I originally delivered. My criticism that I originally delivered would have been considered irrelevant, and then that would have been reinserted with everybody slandering of me and my character and putting me down in my place and canceling me. No,
Mhm.
it can't be like that.
No.
It can't be like that. So you asked what's the difference between a country like China and a country like the United States. You can agree that there are, like, outside of social media and the intranet, there's a lot of negative influences that are going on out there. There's a lot of people putting out misinformation. There's a lot of people putting out just garbage. It's garbage,
Right.
right? And this is supposed to be.
But it's I don't like I don't know. I don't want to say that you're painting China as like this great
It's not.
idea. It's not. I think there's a lot of aspects of what their government is doing to the people is kind of brainwashing them.
Yep.
And feeding them lies about certain things.
Yep.
Keeping them hidden from some of the more unsavory things that the government is actually doing to people there.
Well, we should talk about examples if we're going to do that. I don't think it's appropriate that we perhaps.
Well, right now, at least with the COVID situation, it has come out that people like the police in China are actually welding people's doors shut to keep them in their house if they test positive for COVID.
Yep.
And I don't know if a lot of Chinese people know that's actually happening. I don't know if they're allowed to talk about that. I don't know what's going to happen there. I'm figuring all those people who have been welded into their houses probably died and can't speak out about it. So it's probably working out in the government's favor. Some of the camps that they're doing in Western China for the Uyghur Muslim community is definitely really bad, and I don't think that anybody. I don't think a lot of people in China actually know what that is.
Yeah.
And what's actually going on there.
Yep.
So there's obviously there's definitely sinister things that are going on in China. But I would agree with you with the original statement that they're blocking a lot of Western ideology because it would be impossible to run that country if it was all democracy. If they ran it like America, it would be America times 10. It would just be a complete devolving cesspool of everybody doing whatever they want. It would devolve the same way America is right now, except even more devastating.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, but
and they wouldn't be able to have their planned economy.
No.
They wouldn't be able to do the quote unquote greater good for China if it was run like the States.
Yes, no.
Because clearly that doesn't work for the States.
No. Well, it would work for the States. They just choose not to try it.
Well, because they have this underlying theme of ultimate freedom over anything, so you can do whatever the fuck you want.
But we've already discussed how that's the freedom of no freedom.
Yeah.
So okay,
in the sake of freedom, they're allowed to do whatever they want.
Let's go back a minute here, okay? Because you brought up a valid point. It's like from time to time, perhaps in conversations, I've come off as something of an apologist for China. Certainly, I don't think I've been an apologist for the Chinese government. But I think for certain.
Oh yeah, it's very important to separate the people from the government. Anytime you talk about China, because obviously.
Yeah, but
like there's plenty of Chinese people here in Canada that you meet every day.
That's got to be true of Americans in the American administration too, though.
True.
Right. So you brought up a pretty valid point. You're like, there's a lot of things that are going on in China right now that are considered heinous. Yeah, there are. Every nation has to deal with some uncomfortable truths. So there's always going to be some people who don't fit into the national narrative. There's going to be disparate tribes and groups of people. Like in the United States, you have the immigration from Latin America. In Canada, you have the reservations. Even in the United States, you have these reservations. It's a question of how a nation state deals with its most uncomfortable issues. And in the past, even the best of countries, including all Western European countries, including Canada and the U.S., have all been guilty of not treating people within their own borders properly from time to time. Mm-hmm. Okay, you have to understand that. Yeah. Okay, so I agree with you completely that what's going on right now with the situation in the Gobi Desert. I personally don't subscribe to the efforts that the Chinese government is making to suppress that narrative. That's not. I don't fall in line with that. But at the same time, I would say that when I look at history for examples, I see those examples pretty much everywhere I look. You know, like I said, though, it's not something that I condone. I'm just saying, like, it's part of the reality of nationalizing, of creating a national narrative. And you know what? For Canadians, the Aboriginal people didn't fit into our narrative. For the Americans, even though Latin American immigrants are a huge part of their narrative, they choose to ignore it. Mm-hmm. Right? So you have, and you know what? And you know where this plays out too so well is in the Middle East. To be honest with you, the reason why the Middle East is as fucked up as it is today is because some dude in England, I can't remember his name right now, was responsible for creating the artificial lines which would comprise the borders of these countries back in the late 1700s.
Oh yeah, what was that called? That was the
Yeah. So, anyways,
Sykes-Picot Agreement.
yeah. Well, no, it wasn't. No, Sykes-Picot would have. I believe Sykes-Picot would have governed maybe the borders of Iran and Iraq. Maybe
that's what I'm thinking about.
But yeah. So, anyways, you know what this guy said? So he was responsible for developing the borders all the way to East Asia, all the way to the current administrative zone that the Chinese and the Indians are fighting over in East China, West India, right? And so he was actually pressed on the question. I don't know by who, but somebody who is clearly writing it down at the time, and he said, half of these places that the writer was questioning him on, he'd never even heard of. He was drawing borders that didn't reflect the realities on the ground between people that belonged in a certain territory and didn't belong in a certain territory. It carved people right out of the narrative, which deserved to have their own territory, which never got their own territory. Yeah. It caused all these fractions and frictions amongst people that shouldn't have otherwise been there. Mm-hmm. You have entire country-sized groups of people in the Middle East, including, Jesus, like, why am I drawing a blank on this? Shit. Anyways, yeah. So in northern Syria, why am I drawing a blank on this? Okay, so there's a. I should really actually go on my cell phone and do this. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank, but the bottom.
It happens, though.
Yeah,
that's fine.
The bottom line is that there's whole groups of people right now that have complete representation without a territory to call their own. And that's, that's insane. Kurds. Mm. So in terms of the Kurdish territory, Kurds actually are prevalent in the east part of Turkey, east and southeast part of Turkey, north part of Syria, west part of Iraq, and the southern part of Iran. And these people, they're everywhere, but they don't have a territory. So what they do, they call them Iranian Kurds and Syrian Kurds and Iraqi Kurds, and that's how they differentiate themselves. It's like,
that's insane.
They didn't fit into the cultural narrative. The narrative is created. The myth is created. 1867, the myth of Canada is founded. What does the myth of Canada not contain? Well, Aboriginal people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something about a great railroad being built across the continent, a wave of Eastern European immigrants, and cultivating the marshlands of the middle of the country, and
yeah, this is the whole thing about North America. It's the native people are like an afterthought in the entire idea of just like, oh, people came here and just started building society, and then also these people are over here.
Yeah. Look, we didn't have a.
They have reserves now, so
we didn't have a solution as to what we were going to do with them, so we developed our own. Yeah,
a system that is broken to this day.
Yeah. So So anyways, that you brought up an excellent point. Part of my sort of political crusade with people is to try to bring back these deeper questions every time, because you brought to me some very valuable information. You asked me about something that's happening in China. But I think it's very, very important to know that while I disagree with what's happening right now in the Gobi Desert with the Chinese government, I will not allow people to simply use that as a singular narrative without considering how similar this is to other experiences that have already happened. And to allow people to understand from a very centrist point of, like, to have a centered and well-grounded point of view about reality, that no one country is essentially better than another, regardless of political system, regardless of economic systems, regardless of political systems. They've all created atrocities at some point in their lives, in their political, as a governance, as a governing body of a territory. They've all committed atrocities at some point in time. Even our governments, the most civilized governments, the most rational governments on the planet, how could they ever kill and murder other people? Like, drones aren't killing tens of thousands of people in fucking Sudan and Pakistan every year.
In a very systematic way.
And extradition, torture, and shit like that. Like, where we can go into any country and steal their citizens and fucking take them to a third party and beat the shit out of them and kill them. Like, like, we need to understand, like,
if it's all right.
Every single story we have about one country that's considered the other to our point of view needs to be grounded in a reality that's similar to ours, because we're really no different. We've committed the same atrocities. We've done the same bad things. Did you know that, and I'm sure you know this, by the way, 90% of the fucking hijackers in the 9/11 hijacking were Saudi. And yet we went and we bombed Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yeah, the ultimate confusion of that entire situation.
There's no confusion. That's called
you put that on paper and give it to the average Joe. They'd be like, "What?
What's going on?
What happened here?
Yeah.
What's going on?
It doesn't make any sense.
Why are we starting wars?
Yeah. Why did we stay in Afghanistan for 23 years?
Yeah, it's just, it's completely insane,
right?
Yeah, that whole 9/11 situation is just.
Excuse,
the ultimate excuse. Let's not. We can't go down that rabbit hole.
Don't go down 9/11 rabbit holes. Okay,
because that's a whole nother podcast.
It was just a point to show you that something happens in the national imaginary. 2 planes fly into 2 towers. An irrational response is procured. What are we gonna do? Well, as much as you want to dolly up the fucking response, what it boils down to is, we're going to gallivant to 2 other countries and murder a bunch of fucking people.
Yep.
And we're not going to stop until the guy that we think is responsible for this has his head on a pike. And we don't give a shit if it takes 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 or 100,000 dead casualties. That's collateral damage. That's okay for us, because we've been conditioned to believe that whatever we're doing over there, as many people as we're killing, somehow we're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah, it's fundamentally right.
Yeah.
Whatever the States does is fundamentally right.
That's right. That's right. Don't question it. Don't question it.
Yeah. Banana republics. It's all good.
Banana republics are made, not born.
They're a good store.
Oh, God. I like their suntan lotion.
They have good stuff.
No, it's so there's a lot of people like would listen to this level. Like, I realize that my brand of presenting 2 sides of an issue or multi sides of an issue is definitely not sexy in today's climate. This is literally like, you might as well have thrown gasoline on a brush fire. Right? There's going to be people that are like, I don't understand this guy. Is he on the left? Is he on the right? He's neither. He's not with you. He's just trying to tell you how, if you were to step back and look at things without your blinders on, how you would see it, as opposed to what you're looking at right now, which is probably, I don't know. I just read my 140 character newsfeed on Twitter. It told me that, Trump says China's bad, so I'm going to go to Walmart and I'm going to talk to a bunch of fucking strangers about how bad China is. That's not informed debate. That's not informed conversation. That's not. If you were informed, if you were a reasonable person, you'd go back and you'd figure it out for yourself.
But you're not allowed to do that.
No, you're not.
People fucking hate that now.
That's
know?
right. There's people that are absolutely hating this right now. I guarantee you they
Because
can't.
you're not picking a side. You're not falling in line with the prescribed narrative.
I can't.
And that's a problem. That's
Well,
a problem.
I don't know if it is.
You know, we've known each other for, God, I think 10 years maybe?
Yeah, going on 40.
Going on 40. We're dead.
Yeah, fucking great.
We're very old.
I hope you're at my funeral giving my eulogy.
Oh, God. I don't know. We should make a bet. Who
He
dies
was
first?
a real prick. He was a real prick.
He's a real prick.
I'll tell you, all you guys, I kind of agree with you. He was a real prick. He couldn't pick a fucking side.
This could not pick a
Guy
side.
just wouldn't pick a fucking side. Like, can this guy pick a side already?
I
Like,
said for years, pick a side. It's important.
stop doing this shit.
There are two sides. Pick it.
The red or the blue.
But you're not allowed to do that. You know.
It's gonna be Coke or Pepsi's. It's gonna be neither.
I mean, I've done that political spectrum test like a bunch of times over the past 6-7 years.
Explain to me the political spectrum test. I don't think I've ever been exposed to that.
You can find them online. They're like things. They're just weird, broad questions about your personality and your political views and things like that. It's usually like, sometimes it can be like 10 pages of different questions.
Oh God.
And then at the end, it shows you that 4-quarter chart of the political spectrum. So left, right, and then top down would be top would be totalitarianism, and then the bottom would be anarchy. So that's like the spectrum of that, and then it would be, the left and the right.
So every question on the
other side. So anything in that spectrum would kind of broaden the horizon instead of just a left and right issue, but also how authoritarian you are, but also maybe how maybe libertarian you are. All the way to the absolute bottom of anarchy.
I really don't like these dichotomies, by the way.
Which I don't know. I don't like anarchy. That's not my
It's
thing.
like there's only one question on the entire questionnaire which governs the
one
difference.
question.
It's like,
are you a fucking
no,
douchebag?
how many times do you fap every week? It's like, I fap 20 times. Anarchist.
Anarchist.
This guy's not down with the program.
I withhold the fapping.
He spends too much time.
Nazi.
He spends too much time by himself every week. That's unacceptable.
But every time I do it, I always get the exact same outcome. So it's like slightly left of center libertarian.
I don't.
Which I totally agree with. I guess it's accurate because it's how I see things. Like, I'm definitely a much more progressive, much more liberal person. But I'm never gonna force people on my views or anything like that.
Basically,
that's where the libertarianism
I accept
comes in.
the general tenets of liberalism, but you won't find me out on the streets looting ma and pa shops and throwing Molotov cocktails out there.
I'm not gonna tell you my way of doing things is better. No. That would end up going more north,
and
to the totalitarianism.
It would be completely fucking contra to the
Mm-hmm.
point of this whole discussion we're having right now. Is that it doesn't matter what part of the spectrum you're on. You're gonna end up at the same, you're gonna end up at the same end game. Your political system, your social systems, your economic systems are all gonna be arrived at some preferential agreement between you and the people you're governing. At the end of the day, even the Chinese structure is something that's tacitly arrived at between the people that live in China and the government. Mm-hmm. Okay, the only thing that people are hung up on is like the CCCP can never be replaced. Yeah, no, I mean, to a certain degree, it's true. But the leaders can be. So, I mean,
yeah, true,
right?
And clearly, every leader of China has had their own flavor in a way of how they want to run the show.
Yeah,
maybe it gets worse. Maybe they have somebody who comes in and becomes even more authoritarian. But that doesn't seem to be the trend.
No.
Ever since Mao, that doesn't seem to be
no
what they're trying to get at.
No.
They've been getting a lot more modernized over the years. Yeah. They definitely like making money. They definitely like being able to get everybody out of poverty. They definitely want that. They definitely want to work with other countries. Clearly, this
Yep.
whole
Silk
Belt
Road.
the Belt and Road Initiative
Yep.
is very clear that
Yep.
they want to make these lucrative deals
Yep.
with different countries.
Yeah, for sure.
So, yeah, they're well on their way of becoming the leading superpower.
At
And
this,
probably they already are, but nobody's willing to acknowledge that.
well, in as long as the global reserve currency is the American dollar, the United States will always have that power to at least insert themselves in the conversations as being globally dominant. But we're starting to see a lot of countries now, and these aren't the Libyas, these aren't the Venezuelas, these aren't the Iraqs, these aren't the you know half developed countries that are vying for independent solutions to American hegemony. These are big time power players that can't be pushed around in the world. Like, the United States couldn't win a war in Vietnam, couldn't win a war in Afghanistan. Fucked up a coup attempt in Venezuela in the last 3 weeks or month. The administration played that off, but you can bet they had everything to do with it. And they can't win anywhere. They haven't won a war in the modern era, and there's no way that they could start a real conflict with a country like China and expect that the outcome would be good.
Mm-hmm.
And China knows that too. It's not like, oh, they can't fuck with us. It's like, we don't want them to fuck with us. We don't want to fuck with them. We don't want them to fuck with us. It just so happened, like,
it would be a huge problem. On both sides.
You know what it used to be.
Nobody wants a direct war between superpowers.
From the 1980s, when American manufacturing started to migrate over to China, the Chinese government has become very, very aware of what I would refer to as the dual narrative. You'll see the dual narrative, especially during election years, where a candidate will talk very, very hard line on specific subjects. But behind the scenes, the bureaucrats, which are actually writing the paperwork for all the agreements and shit, will be telling the delegates from, like, say, for example, like, this year is a political election year for the United States. And you may hear a tough rhetoric on China, like, we're going to have to increase the sanctions, agricultural sanctions, put sanctions on our wheat, sanctions on our pork, all this shit, to really hurt the Chinese government or whatever, right? Though this is pretty funny. I actually just lost my point. It's kind of a weird thing when you're doing a live podcast and you just kind of lose yourself. It's like But anyways, yeah, no, sorry, just to pick up on my point. Okay, yeah. So I'm not completely scatterbrained here, people. Yeah,
you figured it out.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I found your way back into it.
I'm a pretty well regulated human being. The brain still works the way it's supposed to. Thank God.
That's the fun thing about podcasts is, like, you kind of get lost in it and then you jump back in.
It's good. I don't mind getting lost once in a while. I just don't like to get lost completely. So,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, no. So, like, during an election year, like what we have right now, you're going to hear a lot of hardlining on China. You're going to hear, agricultural exports. We need to do this and that and this and that, right? Behind the scenes, they actually have this political idea. It's called the back channel phone, where governments are allowed to talk to each other directly on a non-regulated landline. So they have what's called back channel communication. And the Chinese government and the American government are always engaged in back channel communication, i.e., what's going on in the political theater on CNN does not necessarily represent what's going on in the bureaucratic dealings between the two countries. China, since 1980, has become very, very accustomed to, especially during political years, election years, hardlining on China. But during this election cycle, it has become so unbearable, so ridiculous, and the information so factually incorrect that China has had no choice but to actually retaliate. This, if you know anything about politics, represents a remarkable turn in the restraint of the Chinese administration towards the shit that comes out of Washington. They're just they're officially sick of it. They're sick of it. And I can see it because a lot of it's cutting deep. It's not just rhetoric anymore. It's stuff that's actually happening, right?
It's stuff that's, like, borderline racist as well.
the whole thing, the whole selling it to the American public is completely enrobed in the idea of racism and othering the Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. The whole goal of it is to create.
Well, that was the idea of the Cold War and making the Russians the other.
Yeah.
And now this is the new enemy. They're threatening America's bottom line.
Yeah.
And now they have to be turned into evil people who eat bats and want to destroy you.
Yep. Yep.
By any means possible.
I could just see it. I feel the tension when I get off the airplane in China.
Mm-hmm.
I can see them all staring at me. They want to kill me. I'm just kidding. It's like the most.
You have to flash your Canadian passport.
It's the most. No. Well, given given the dealings of our government in relation to being America's cuckold in this whole fucking China confrontation, they don't see our passport as anything more to piss on than the American passport at this time.
Right.
Like we're all a bunch of fucking immature idiots for the stupid. How can you illegally detain the CEO of a major corporation of another country? How can you do that?
It was a bad move. I think we should have just left that to the Americans.
Honestly. Think we should have put her back on a fucking plane to Shenzhen and said, "Fucking get out of here before you get Assanged." That's what I think. I think we should have done. I don't give a shit where that puts us in the United States books. Hell, our relationship can recover.
Well, that shit like that is going to happen more and more often when countries start siding with China rather than the States.
Yes. Yeah.
Because clearly it's not really in anybody's benefit to side with the States.
No.
At this point.
No, and for what it's worth, I mean, the Canadian government's starting to already make pivots with some of our major exports, right? Mm-hmm. They're already positioning themselves for the future. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
If there's a this is the stupid part of it. It's like the United States would cut off its own nose to spite its face. It's perfectly happy telling China that we're going to put tariffs on our agricultural products and our pork, for example, and doesn't seem to realize that there's like a half dozen other suppliers that China can go to and readily get their stuff. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever as a carrot and stick approach to try to get people to try to win people over to the United States perspective. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, who benefits from tariffs imposed on China in that respect? It would be countries like Canada who overproduce pork. So what do you think Canada's doing on those back channel communications that I was just speaking of? They're on the fucking phone with the CCCP. They're trying to backdoor some deals. Because clearly the tariffs in the United States have presented brand new opportunities for the Canadian government. Right? And the American government is
if they don't want to do business, then other countries will.
You know what? Our trade wars with the United States and Canada go back a long time, all the way back to softwood lumber. But this was back in the 90s, and they were part of contractual agreements that the United States never fully paid for. And the United States and Canada have a history of very tenuous trade agreements. Right? Mm-hmm. Donald Trump put a tariff on Canadian aluminum. Yep. Why would he do that? We're friends. Well, it just goes to show you, like, if you're friends with the United States, you don't have to accept any treatment other than the treatment they give everybody else.
Yeah.
If they see you as harming their own interests, they're gonna try to fuck with you somehow.
They're gonna fuck you.
Yeah.
They're gonna find a way to stab you in the back.
They're gonna find a way to fuck you. Mm-hmm. They will.
Yep.
Right? Oh, I mean, they're not going to invade Canada. They're not fucking stupid. But they could. If they really wanted to.
They could,
right?
But what do you think the backlash would be?
I don't want to really talk about it. I don't see it ever happening, so it would be really tough for me to consider.
Yeah, I mean, hypothetically,
do you know what I think would happen?
I think there would be a lot of.
You know what I think would happen?
I
think it would. I think it would result in a political land grab for many different countries.
Mm.
Yeah. I do. I think as soon as one part of Canada is annexed by another country, I think it's look. I know that you want to think that the states of the world, they all get together in international forums and sing "Kumbaya" and shit. But the truth of the matter is, I mean, a lot of these countries, they're advantageous. The leaders are advantageous. They're always looking for resources. They're always looking for, stuff to give them an extra edge, right? Look at all the fresh.
Right, but in a country where the Queen of England owns 89% of the land, you think she's gonna sit back and be like, "Yes, please take all the land that I own"?
Who's gonna come in? The British military? Give me a fucking break.
You think the British wouldn't spin that in some way where it's like, "Hey,
The
Commonwealth."
the British.
They start spinning all crazy.
The British could spin it in.
They try to figure it out.
The British could spin it linguistically any way that they wanted to. If something like that was to happen and they weren't prepared to act, which they're not, because, well, let's face it, they're not. They're not equipped for any long-term military theater. They're not equipped for extensive theaters. They're equipped to do specialization rules, much like the Canadian armed forces. We're not a military force per se. We're a specialist group that accommodates and assists other groups, like NATO and what have you, right? We're a tag along. We're not a fucking independent. We're not really an independent military technically.
Right.
We don't have the manpower to do that. So
No.
neither does England, believe me.
No.
They're not built for that shit.
They're not planning on doing major scale wars.
Yeah. So you asked me though, what
Why
would
would they do that?
the Queen of England wouldn't sit by? She wouldn't have a fucking choice if that happened. It'd be over.
I guess. I don't think it would ever happen though.
It wouldn't happen.
I think it's a little bit
Again,
ridiculous.
when you first said it, what was the first thing I said? I don't want to engage in this because it's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, and
But I
then
mean,
I
like,
willingly
and then you
engaged in
it.
it,
'Cause,
like an
that's what I do.
idiot.
I'm gonna,
You caught me in the netting.
because that's good entertainment.
You caught me in the netting.
But yeah, it's a good thought experiment.
I
I guess.
so.
It's kind of fucked up, but whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to happen because I think that would be really stupid, and I think a lot of countries around the world would look at that situation and be like, "Why?"
Yes.
And also another reason to hate the states.
No, not really.
I think so. I think so.
No. I don't think.
Look at the oppressors picking on Canada. That's how they're going to spin it in the media.
Let's be honest about something here. If Canada was to be annexed by the United States, nobody would be shedding a tear any more than they would have in Syria or anywhere else that the United States has tried to impose regime change. If anything, the most logical outcome would be a domestic failure and a failed state, because the people of Canada wouldn't buy into the idea of becoming Americans overnight. It's just not an acceptable reality for most Canadians. As a matter of fact,
Right.
you'd probably get every capable man and woman with that's capable of holding a pitchfork would probably go and rebel against it.
Sure.
Yeah. I definitely do. I think it would be a little bit more organic in terms of its, but like it's just like Afghanistan. Yeah. Why did the 23 years? Why did the 23-year war in Afghanistan fail? It's because the people didn't buy into the fucking American prescription. They just wanted to be Afghans. All they wanted was to be themselves without an oppressive regime at the head of their state. That's all they wanted, right? It's not. Their demands weren't outrageous.
Yeah.
Okay, and you end up with a failed state.
I mean, you can't Americanize every single culture.
Yeah, but just like for the cost of kicking, like if they went in with a 23-year project in Afghanistan that resulted in a failed state, what makes anybody think that if that was to happen in Canada, the same wouldn't happen? Right? Fucking
true.
right. Yeah, absolutely, it would happen. Right? A failed state only happens when the majority of the population fails to believe that the institutions are there for their benefit. That's really all it is. So if the majority of Canadians found out someday that the majority of their institutions were pro-American and didn't really serve their interests, they probably lose faith in them. We're just caught in a really weird confluence in Canada between legacy British influence and American contemporary influence. We're in a really weird political, social, economic vortex in Canada. We absorb a lot of shit from a lot of places in the world. So I feel like Australia would be the same. I feel like if there was a next kin for Canada in terms of just its, physical climate, it's being a place of living for human beings. It's pretty similar to Australia. It's Australia is kind of a sad case in my opinion. They've really kind of picked up the anti-China mantle and run
Pretty
with
hard.
it and taken it twice as far, even as American.
Even though it completely destroys our economy.
their entire economy is dependent upon China.
Yeah, they're digging a deep hole here.
It's not appropriate to piss off your main trading partner.
I mean, they claim to be part of the West, but most people don't believe that they're part of the West because
They try hard.
they don't trade with. They trade a bit with the States, but most of their trade comes from Asia.
Yes.
They're part of Asia.
Yeah.
Like that's their fucking thing.
Yeah.
It's technically a different continent, but
They probably
still the proximity dictates that you're gonna have to do some deals with China. Like
Yeah.
But they think
they
think that it's part of Europe.
Not only that, there's very likely because they don't grow a whole bunch of shit. They don't produce a whole bunch of shit.
There's fucking nothing there,
Right.
except for kangaroos, which are apparently delicious.
Well, I'm not sure I'd go there.
Well, they eat them there.
I'm not sure I would go there with the kangaroo. I think I got a piece of pouch, and I just didn't like it. Oh, look, that's a piece of chewy, furry pouch.
Pouch. The pouch piece is the best.
Deep fried
It's like pork rinds.
pouch rinds.
Yeah, I don't know.
So okay, so you know what? To get to the point though, it's like it's the most hilarious thing for me because you have to believe, based on the lack of productive area available in Australia, just based on the population, their population's just a little bit, I think it's like 28 million or something like that. It's not that much smaller than Canada in terms of its population.
Yeah.
With not a lot of arable land, which is kind of similar to Canada, except Canada's bigger, so it has a little bit more. Those countries that don't produce enough for their own populations have to run ridiculous trade deficits to get the goods that their people need to consume. Right? So not only are their biggest trade partners in Asia, including Thailand, by the way, is a huge trade partner of Australia. Why wouldn't it be? It's the land of every fruit and vegetable ever. I mean, it's it's a fucking veritable breadbasket. And if you the first thing is that there is a huge reliance on these countries for their sustenance. The second thing is that you have to believe that there is a major, like, Australia is getting majorly favorable trade deals. Because if you don't have a tit-for-tat trade arrangement, like we've got 30 resources we want to trade for your 30 resources, or you're trading your 5 resources for like 40 different resources, you have to have one hell of a favorable trade deal in place in order to actually facilitate that, how do you want to call it, trade imbalance. Right. And that's exactly what's happening. And Australia is amazing at biting the hand that feeds it, so to speak. It's remarkable. Not only this sounds kind of funny because Australia is not a cheap place, but not only are they able to get the goods that they need to get into Australia, but they're actually paying a lot less for them than they should be, which is an outrageous statement given how expensive it already is to buy stuff there. They're buying it, believe it or not, even though it's outrageously expensive, they're still buying it at a discount. For what it's worth, like if you considered all, industrial processes, the shipping, retail value, paying off your retail spaces, all this shit, it's still being sold at a discount compared to what it costs you to get it there. And the only reason that you'd be able to do that is because you're leaning on China for cheap goods and abundant goods. And if you didn't do that, what would you be?
The weirdest thing to me is that Australia exports beef to China.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Why? Why China can't have cows?
Yeah, that's a...
it's a much bigger country.
I just don't know.
Actually, is it a bit bigger? It's definitely bigger than Australia.
It's bigger than Australia.
Yeah. Like, they would obviously have the capacity to be able to do that kind of farming.
I don't know w's obvious
and
what's
clearly there's
not.
A demand for it.
I haven't really...
and obviously now, like, they're halting the exports.
There might be a... they'll just come to Canada. This is what I'm telling you. Like, these countries are biting off their nose to spite their face. They don't get it. If you live in a multiple supplier climate, the next, it's the next country up. That's all there is.
Right.
Right. So like, yeah, the Canadian government's back channeling the Chinese government right now, saying, "Oh, you want a beef contract? Okay. You want pork contracts? Okay. Oh, you want more wheat? All right."
And especially in a country like China, where clearly their entire foreign policy is just business deals.
Yes.
So they're just gonna figure out the best next business deal.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. It's absolutely going to happen. They try to approach every situation as if it's something. There's a conversation being had between two rational actors. They're not trying to treat Lesotho in Africa or the Congo like they're the fucking the bastard child in the room. If China's been guilty of anything in their trade relationships, it's being too honest and putting equal stock in the governance of the countries that they're doing partnerships with and stuff like this is unheard of. It's uncharted territories in terms of constructing bilateral trade arrangements and stuff like that. It doesn't. This whole lexicon of this is the part that perturbs the West the most. They are looking under every rock, trying to find out what advantage China's getting from their Belt and Road Initiative.
They're trying to find a problem here.
China could never, because they're seeing it through their own lexicon.
Yeah.
For 300 years, there was never a trade deal done by any Western or colonial power that didn't benefit the colonial or Western power. That's the way they've been conditioned to think. When we do trade deals with other people, we always win. So when China goes and does it, the first thing that they're doing is trying to find the angle that China's using. Why are they doing this? They must be trying to seek some advantage. There must be something here. There's something nefarious they're not telling us about. It's like, yeah, maybe just maybe other countries which don't adopt the same strategy as you or don't have the same political and economic affiliation might have a fundamentally different way of viewing the world. Maybe has a fundamentally different way of viewing partnership, cooperation. Imagine that. Cooperation. Holy shit.
Ooh.
Nobody cooperates.
Weird.
That's the world that we were taught never existed. Countries could never cooperate with one another. They're too self-interested. Yeah, right. They can absolutely cooperate with one another.
It always has to end with the war.
Yeah. Right.
That is the idea.
Right. But for the last 300 years, it's only two countries that have been primarily warring, and I would say three. If you take Nazi Germany in there, I would say three.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, other than that, well, I mean, you've had wars in the last 300 years. I would say in the last 100 years, there hasn't been a single conflict aside from the United States and England that hasn't been perpetuated by them in some way, shape, or form. War, not conflict. Conflict exists everywhere. I believe conflict is endemic to the human case.
Well, conflict it could mean tons of different things.
And
verbal
also,
conflict.
And also conflict does not necessarily result in confrontation, i.e. physical altercation or whatever, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So, it's okay for countries to have disagreements about things like that. It's okay for conflict to arise because I believe that while conflict is endemic to the human experience, war is not. I believe war is unnatural. I believe war is something like... war would have to be something that you grew up believing was a fundamental truth. That's not how it works. You have to be thoroughly indoctrinated into the doctrine of war. You have to be sold on it in order to accept it as something that's necessary and legitimate. Yeah, it's not something that is built into you. It's not something that's built into the human race either. War is something terrible. War is a byproduct of irrational people making confrontations go too far. I would say that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, what the fuck can you do? Confrontation is everywhere too. I mean, it's not just something that exists over there. It's definitely something that's here. It's all over your streets. It's in the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. It's embodied in every statue that's getting pulled down. Every black person that has their neck kneeled on. So.
Well, for sure, man.
Yeah.
Well, we're getting a little long here.
No, don't do that.
So.
Don't do that.
You want to do a part 2?
Yeah, we could do a part 2.
Okay.
Yeah, we could.
Well, I'll pause this part, and then we'll start a part 2.
Alrighty, sounds good.
Okay.
We'll see you guys after a little potty break.
Bop, 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 ba-dum, bop.